Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today. It is Sunday, that's right, November 7th, and it's 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which means we are doing our live stream with you right now. We're reaching out on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, DLive, and pretty much all of the internet that the internet overlords will allow to reach out to hear your voices on the issues that matter to us all, the things that are affecting everyone in the world. And we welcome each and every one of you, no matter what country you're in, because you have a right, an indelible, inalienable right to free speech, whether your government, whether the internet overlords like it or not. And we're going to have a great time talking with you all about this. I hope everyone's gotten used to the change in time, because I know it throws off everyone whenever we have the daylight savings change. So hopefully that's been good for you. Hopefully you've made it through the election cycle and things are good in your state, in your country. It's a little bit hectic here, and we're going to get into a little bit of that because there have been some problems, quite a few problems actually, with the elections, and not the ways that most people would think. But we've noticed a few problems with that. We're going to address that. We're going to talk a little bit about Florida, about the Biden administration, the new mandate or the existing mandate and how it's going to be spreading on everyone, the economy, just a heck of a lot of stuff that's going on, especially in China as well. And we, most of all, are looking forward to hearing your comments. And you can reach us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. You can send us your chats, your tweets. They'll be put up onto the screen for everyone to see. And you can also call into the show at 607-242-1582 to actually speak with us live to tell us what you think is going on, what your thoughts are, and what are the issues you care about. Because this is a conversation, first and foremost, with you. And we hope that if this is the first time you've seen us, you're enjoying the show and you're going to have a great time. So let me jump right into a couple of the first issues. I don't know if everyone noticed this as much, that remember we were talking to you back in May. It was actually May 23rd. And we helped tell you that in Chattanooga, in Tennessee, in the middle of the night, the Biden administration were taking children from the southern border and they were spreading them across Chattanooga, showing up in the middle of the night, and all of a sudden those kids were there. Then it was about a month ago, you heard the news from New York City, New York State, and that the Biden administration was taking children and other immigrants, and they were shipping them around in the middle of the night, a couple thousand kids, middle of the night. No one knew about this. No one was told. These kids were just arriving suddenly out of the blue. Well, now we find out that in Florida, since the middle of the summer, over 70 flights, hundreds, in fact, thousands of illegal aliens have been sent from the southern border into Florida. No one told anyone. No one knew about this. They were going into Jacksonville. There were literally over 70 air charter flights that were sent, and there were over 36 passengers on each flight. We're talking about hundreds of individuals. And here's the thing that really kicks it off. Nobody in the Justice Department, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Health and Human Services, nobody knows what's going on. No one is talking to anyone. You just don't know about it. The news media isn't really covering this. Definitely the major news media, the left-leaning news media, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, they're not talking to you about this. They're not telling you what the Biden administration is doing. Kamala Harris isn't at the southern border. She has nothing to do with the immigration crisis, even though she was put in charge of that back in February. Joe Biden, well, who knows what Joe Biden knows these days? And yet this is happening. And so far, we've got 3 states that we're seeing this in Tennessee, in New York, in Florida. And I would bet that this is happening in multiple states and no one knows about this. This is the answer to the immigration crisis at our southern border. And this was reported yesterday by the New York Post, as I just showed you. So it's incredible. It's incredible that we are seeing so many people put around our nation hidden in the middle of the night. That's just, it's not even duplicitous. It's insulting. By the way, Dal, we want to thank you. First one to comment today. We thank you for that. And Dal says that Twitter and YouTube are loud and clear. For those who are just seeing the show for the first time, sometimes we have great difficulty with the internet overlords, depending on the subjects that we're speaking about. And so we have difficulty reaching out to the public. So thank you for making me aware of that, Dal. So let's think about this. This government, the Biden-Harris administration, their answer to a problem, a massive problem, over 1.5 million illegal aliens entering the nation that we know of, the fact that we have children dying in the southern desert in Texas and in California, their answer to the overcrowding, the cages that have been filled with children, many of them suffering from the pandemic, their answer has been, hide this from the public. Stop the media from going down to being able to see these facilities that are overcrowded, and to take children and other illegal aliens from those facilities and ship them around the country. Don't tell anyone where they're going. Don't tell anyone when they're showing up. Do it all in the middle of the night. Make it as clandestine as possible and tell the news media and the public nothing. This is their solution. And you wonder why people don't trust the government? When the government is doing clandestine, these are things we would expect to see in a spy movie, that people are being shuffled around the country. This is straight out of the book from Stalin, because that's what he did. He would take entire villages, entire cities, and move people from one end of a country of the Soviet Union to the other end of the Soviet Union and never tell anyone. And the people didn't have a choice. They went or they disappeared forever. Now, is the United States doing that? No, of course not. We're not that far off. But we are getting closer and closer to that edge. When we see that governors, cities, nobody in the government knows what's going on the federal or state level, this is a problem. And yes, we should question our government. Our news media should be questioning our government. This should be one of the many stories that are frontline. Dow mentions that, speaking of this influx, these people are disappearing off the radar after they drop these kids and other illegals off. A large percentage of the children, especially, are just gone. And that's my point. We don't know. There's no tracking of these individuals. We know that just last month, what was it? 17,000 Haitian immigrants decided that it was better to live under a bridge in Del Rio, Texas, than to live in Haiti or to live in South America, where many of them have been for years. It was better to live under a bridge in America. And the Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, decided to let 12,000 of these individuals into the United States. And we have no idea where they went. We have had over 50,000 children that have been abused. And this is, and I've said this before, I'll say it again. It is child abuse to send a child from one country on a 1,000-mile trek without any parental supervision in the hands of drug dealers and sex gangs so that they can try and get to enter the United States. Many of them dying along the way. We have untold numbers of children that are being affected. And they're coming into the nation, and then they're just disappearing into our nation. We have no idea what's going on, which is one of the reasons why we have seen a massive spike in sex trafficking in the United States since February, which happens to also coincide with the Biden-Harris administration taking over. And one of the things that is helping this process is the fact that the Biden administration is saying, we're going to pay $450,000, as it was first reported by CNN and the Wall Street Journal, that they're going to pay $450,000 to illegal aliens to be in the United States. Think about that for a second. We're talking about numbers that could total as much as the $13 billion needed to save 12 million people in America from eviction and losing their homes. That's how much money we're talking about. It could be as much as it's estimated as much as $15 billion. Now, the way our government spends money, that doesn't sound like a lot, but remember, there's 12 million Americans who are in the process of eviction at this moment. That has not been solved. The government has stopped talking about it. The news media has stopped talking about it, but the eviction process, foreclosures have restarted as of last month. People are being evicted from their homes as we speak. And you have to ask the question, that's something that could have been prevented. This is the money that we could have, instead of giving it to illegal aliens, we could have given it to American citizens and resolved this problem and let them stay in their homes and reduce the amount of homelessness that's going to be going up in this nation. An issue that I am very passionate about because I have been homeless twice in my life. I understand what it is to not be able to go home, to sleep on the steps of a church because it's sanctuary, and having no idea what you're going to be doing next, to have no idea of safety when you want to try and go to sleep. It's not a pleasant experience. Please, let me tell you, I don't wish that on anyone, regardless of their politics. And yet, that's an issue that we could have resolved. And instead of resolving it, we now see that they are giving this money to illegal aliens. Dow mentions Biden got pretty angry over being asked about that. He blasted the journalist asking about it and said that during a press conference that the amount he doesn't know, but if the illegals can prove loss of a child, they deserve some sort of compensation. And this is the idiocy, this is idiocy, to make this statement and then tell us, well, there is no crisis at the southern border, even as we have multi-decades long increases. This is the highest numbers we've seen since I believe the 1980s, the number of people who are trying to enter America because they believe the Biden administration will take care of them. And as Biden says, no, we're going to be strict. We let in 12,000 Haitian illegal aliens, and now we're paying these illegal aliens. And Biden, you're right, Dow. He said, well, $450,000, we're not going to pay that much money. That's not true. And we covered this last week. He said, no, we're not paying. That's just a garbage report. It's not true. He said the Wall Street Journal and CNN lied when they said the American government was going to give $450,000 per illegal alien for the separation of their children, which is something by law, 1997 law. And then what happened right after he made that statement? And this is the part of the news not as well covered by most news media. The Biden administration said, nope, that's not true. We are in negotiations. The ACLU stood up and said, no, we're talking with the Department of Justice right now. We are talking about giving illegal aliens some amount of money. $450,000 per person may be too much. And now the Democrats are saying, well, no, we're going to change that number. We're not going to give them quite that much money. We're going to give them a different amount of money. So let me ask you something, folks. If they give every illegal alien $50,000 for entering the United States, breaking our laws, they broke our law to come into our country without authorization. So if you want to call them undocumented migrants, well, the answer is they're undocumented because they have no authorization to be here. They are criminals. They have broken our law, willfully broken our law. They are evading prosecution in the law. They are criminals, period. There is no other legal definition for them. They are illegal. And imagine that you are paying someone for breaking the law. And if you're in California, I understand you think it's a great idea, because in California, they are paying criminals $600 a month to not break the law. This is where the Biden-Harris administration has taken us. This is the nature of America at this moment. They're paying $600 for people not to break the law. They are paying, let's call it $50,000 per illegal alien for entering the United States, for breaking our laws. This is your money. This is your money. It's coming out of your pocket. This is why they are raising taxes. This is why inflation is up, as we predicted back in February 17th of 2021. You can see the video. We predicted it's going to get higher. The inflation is going up. It's permanent. The Fed has confirmed that. And you're paying for this. James. Hello, James. Good to see you. James Lucid says, OSHA mandates fines to pay for illegal compensation. Yes, $14,000 for breaking the pandemic medication mandates. If you don't get the shot, the jab, well, then your business is going to be charged up to $14,000. You will eventually be fired from your job, including if you work for the federal government. Did you know that? That you will ultimately, they are going to fire you. They're going to punish you. And it's not even a law. You're not breaking the law. This is a mandate that has never been put up for a vote. You didn't have any choice. Your representatives in Congress have never had a choice. You just got told you have to do it. It's kind of like what's going on right now with the Justice Department. You know, just like in this Justice Department report, the Biden administration lied to your face. Joe Biden lied to your face. He said they are not going to pay these illegal aliens, or at least he said they're not going to pay them $450,000, with the implied idea that we aren't paying the government. Matter of fact, this was the conversation that was happening with the press secretary with questions from the press. And they said this.
Thanks, Rain. So your administration is negotiating cash payments for some illegal immigrants who were separated from family members under the last administration. Why give taxpayer money to people who broke federal law to get here?
You like this question, Peter. We talked about this yesterday.
But not to the heart of the point, which is that these people broke the law to come here, and they are going to get hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxpayer money.
A couple of things. I mean, I cannot speak to this from here. This is the Department of Justice.
And we asked them, and they said no comment, so we have to ask you.
Well, and I'm telling you that this is in litigation, and so you have to talk to the Department of Justice about this. This is not something that I can speak from here on the particulars, on the specifics. But, you know, I said this to you yesterday, Peter. One of the things that we have to remember, why we're in this place that we are today, is because we had an administration that had an inhumane, immoral policy that was taking babies away from their families, from their mothers. That was the policy of the last administration. That is why we are here today, and that's you asking me this question that I actually cannot answer, because you got to go to the Department of Justice to get the particulars. But just be clear, that's why this is happening today.
Wait for it.
Mitch McConnell and Chuck Grassley have written a letter to the Attorney General. They say that any settlements to illegal aliens because they violated the law are wrong. Does the president agree with that or disagree with that?
So yesterday I addressed and I clarified the president's comments on the thinking on this, because you asked him a question and he answered it directly. But anything about the process, again, anything about the specifics or the particulars, I can't answer from here behind this podium, okay. So you would have to go to the Department of Justice.
Then to internal White House processes, when the ACLU heard the president dismiss the idea of $450,000 payments the other day, the ACLU came out and they said he may not have been fully briefed about the actions of his very own Justice Department. So is the president being kept out of the loop about immigration policymaking?
Again, Peter, the president was asked, you asked him a question, a direct question, he was answering it. I cannot say any more than that.
Okay, final one then. Yep. There is a long line to get into this country legally. Is there any kind of discussion about giving people who are coming here the right way money?
Why would
why would we be giving people who are coming here the right way money?
Why are you giving people who came here the wrong way?
I mean, but I don't.
See, and that's it right there. That's it. See, I wanted to play that in full because very often the news media doesn't like to give people context. They don't like you to see the whole thing. They don't want you to understand the fullness. This is a 3-minute conversation, not even. And I want you to understand it. So what did we hear in that? Because I know the news media likes to chop it up. They like to give you 1 or 2 words, maybe a sentence. So the White House was asked, what's going on? Their answer is talk to the Department of Justice. Well, the Department of Justice is saying we can't talk about it. And the White House is saying we can't talk about it. So you don't get to find out what's happening to your tax money. No one's going to talk to you about it. This is a secret that you will only find out after it's already done. Isn't that amazing? It's your money, your tax money. They're taking your money and they're going to give it away. They are in discussion right now. The only question is, it isn't a question of, is the Biden-Harris administration going to give your money to people who broke the law? It's how much. And they don't want to tell you that because they know you won't like it. And they know that you're going to vote based on that. They don't want you to know. They want to slip this through, kind of like how they ship kids in the middle of the night into Chattanooga and into New York State and into Florida. They don't want you to know because you would be upset. You would say, what are you doing? So rather than answer your questions and be accountable or perhaps transparent, do you remember that in the 2020 election? Do you remember that being said in 2016 and 2012? Remember how you were told that this is going to be the most transparent government you have ever seen, as they are in your face denying to tell you what's happening to children who were abused and now being shipped around the world, around the nation. And now they don't want to tell you how much money of your money they're going to give to people who broke the law. And they're looking at this like, well, why would we pay anyone? Why would we pay people money for legally coming into the United States? Why are you doing it for the people who illegally did that? And then you heard the press secretary say, well, this is because it was illegal. It was immoral what the Trump administration did. And I'm going to get to your comments in 1 second, folks. Except they are lying to you. That is a lie from the press secretary. Because it is a law. The Trump administration is following the same 1997 law that the Obama administration had to follow. And in 2015, the Obama administration went to court to change that law so that they didn't have to separate families of the illegal aliens when children were caught with parents and they had to be separated by 1997 law from the Clinton administration. And you know what the answer was? The courts said, nope, you have to follow the law as it is written unless Congress changes the law. So Trump followed what Obama did with Biden as vice president, and now he got blamed for doing what Obama did, and now that makes him illegal. So now you have to lose your money. Taxes are going to go up for you. Inflation's going to go higher because they're going to take thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars of your money, and they're going to give it to someone who broke the law on purpose because Biden said, come on into the United States. We're giving away free money. And if you think that's not what the people around the world, people in Haiti, in El Salvador, in China, if you're thinking they're not hearing America's giving away free money to people who enter their country, then you aren't listening to what's being said around the world. Let me get to some of the comments here. So, Dow mentioned that no money should be paid for criminal behavior. However, I believe the reported initial indication was $450,000 per payment. No, that's not correct, Jim. Dow, it is $450,000 per person, up to $1 million per family. So I want to be very clear about that because I know, again, it's been misreported and news media has not provided the information clearly for people. It's $450,000 per illegal alien, up to $1 million per family of your money. Not the people who are in the United States and they're getting evicted because of the pandemic and they lost their jobs and their business got closed down and they can't pay for their mortgages. No, we're going to give it to people from Haiti, El Salvador, from horrible countries around the world because they broke our law. Jeremiah. Hello, Jeremiah. And I heard, Jeremiah, you want to speak about something a little bit in a moment. And I do look forward to hearing from you, Jeremiah. Bargaining trick. He mentions that this is a bargaining trick. Say a high amount and then lower it to hopefully make the public okay with the payments. If you give the illegal aliens money and evict Americans, then the banks and landlords will get their money from the illegals, further changing the demographic makeup of America and subsidizing landlords and banks in a unique way. That is a unique way of looking at it, and I can't say that it's entirely wrong, because people are losing their homes, their mortgages. They're selling their homes. And so now you're giving these homes, effectively, you are giving away homes to illegal aliens. And that, when you're doing that, I guarantee you, people from other countries, like imagine if you live in North Korea, where we have an entire family, 10 people living in an apartment. In China, where you have families living in an apartment, where they don't have space, where they don't get to have property. And they find out, hey, you can go to America and they will give you enough money to go buy a home. I don't know, 1,000 square feet, 2,000 square feet. Can you imagine the appeal of that? That they're paying people to come to America and giving them homes. If you had the choice of living in North Korea in squalor, if you had the choice of living in China under the oppressive rule of the communist government, or you could come to America and you could get paid 5 times as much money as you already make, and you can get a home, which one would you do? I don't blame the illegal aliens. I understand why they're coming to America. We're a great country. Democrats and progressives like to tell you it's not. They aren't coming here because it's not a great country. They're coming here because it is. And the Democrats, the progressives, have opened up the floodgates and said, just walk on in. And it's your money. It's your rights. It's everything they're taking from you to give to them. This is redistribution of wealth. This is the reality of how redistribution works. And Democrats like to say, oh, it's really not that bad. No, we're not really. This is how you redistribute wealth. You pay people, even if it's $50,000, you pay people money to come into the country and you give them homes. That's redistributing wealth, folks, because it's coming from your pocket. Let me go on. Dow mentions the old, this is not my department. Yeah, and I love that. You speak to another department, and that department says, go speak to another department. This is why people hate government, in the bureaucracy of government. Go around in the circles, talk to all these different departments, and they'll send you back to the place you started with, and everyone will say, well, I don't have the answer. You got to talk to someone else. It's not my problem. It's not my paperwork. I'm not the one who's authorized to tell you that. Meanwhile, you get the shaft, and they keep doing whatever it is they're doing behind these closed doors, behind your back. This is not transparency. And this was not resolved by the 2021 election. And I don't think it's going to be. It's not going to be resolved by the 2022 election. There is a problem because we are not holding these politicians accountable, and the news media is covering this stuff up. Mike Bowie, hello, Mike. He says, that wasn't Trump's policy. That was the law to separate the children. I know, it's a 1997 law. Again, they're lying to you. And no one in the news media challenged the White House for saying, oh, this was the Trump administration. Wasn't this a law? Wasn't this a law in 1997 under the Clinton administration that was that the Obama administration was forced to follow, and the Trump administration followed the law? Why are we paying people money when we're following the law? We're doing what the law tells us we have to do. That when someone enters our country illegally and they have children with them, we have to separate those children from those illegal aliens. By law, it is a requirement. And when we do that, because they broke the law in the first place, because they're undocumented, they're illegal, now we have to pay them our taxes. We have to give them our money. It's kind of like New York State that gave $2 billion to illegal aliens, $15,000 checks. It was $15,600 a piece that came out of the people of New York State, which is $8 billion in debt. We spent our debt. Your taxes went up. Your tax burden went up. Your property taxes went up because New York State said, oh, we're going to give these illegal aliens $15,000 a piece. Tell me, folks, does this make any sense? Do you feel like this is what your government should be doing? I mean, if you do, fine. Phone number 607-242-1582. Please tell me if you think, like many progressives do, that, well, there are no borders in the world and you should just be able to go to any country and anywhere you want. And no one has any right to stop you. And when you get there, you should be given stuff just because you exist. Whether or not it's a burden to the people and it's unregulated and it destroys the society, no, that doesn't matter. If you think that's the case and you think that's the reality, please tell me. Because I do understand the progressive arguments. I do know what the progressive ideology is. It just doesn't make any sense. In the real world, it doesn't work. As to quote Eric Adams, the new mayor of New York City, as he said, it's not practical. Progressivism isn't practical, but it's being done anyway. It's part of the reason why our government's so inefficient right now. And if you think I'm wrong, please tell me. I want to hear this. I want to have that discussion. Everyone who's watching this program from around the world, they want to hear this because they're taking their lead from the United States. They are watching us, and we are exporting these ideas, these progressive ideas, into countries like the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Australia, Canada. They are following our lead. And they're doing what we are pushing out there. We're telling them, this is the way you have to deal with illegal immigration. This is how you deal. You got to open up your borders. You have to take people in. You have to give them all of the money from your taxpayers, your actual national citizens, and give it to people just because they showed up. And as you can imagine, in the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Australia, Canada, and so many other countries, they don't agree. The people do not agree. But I ask you again, how much of your taxes, how much of your money are you willing to give to someone who broke the law? Do you really think that's the best way to deal with crime and immigration, which is illegal immigration, which is a crime? How much money do you think you should pay for that? How much should be paid for by the average American citizen? I really want to know. And I'm going to put that question up in a second. Yeah, I like Dal's answer. Zero, nada, zip. And yet, the Biden administration is giving your money away. And Democrats are hiding it from you. And the news media doesn't want to talk about it. Do you know how bad this is? Okay, and we don't usually quote this. We don't usually use Fox News on this show as a source. But no one else is covering this story. No one else is telling the public about this. There was a bill from the House GOP to block any payment, not just the $450,000 per illegal alien, but they wanted to block the United States government paying any illegal alien any amount of money for breaking our laws. We actually had a bill, and they put it forth. In fact, that bill in case you want to look it up, because I know the news media never tells you the name of the bill. They never give you a way to access it. After the show, you will see the link to this so you can look it up yourself. It is called H.R. 5854. I say again, H.R. 5854. It is a very, very simple bill. All it says is the United States government will not pay criminals for breaking the United States law. That the Biden administration, that the Attorney General, which would be Attorney General Merrick Garland, the very same man who's using the FBI to intimidate parents for being involved with their kids in the schools. Merrick Garland, they're saying, does not have the right to take your tax dollars and spend it on illegal aliens. 158 members of Congress have signed this bill. The bill was introduced on November 4th. 158. And by the way, they're all Republicans. Not one Democrat in Congress, in the House of Representatives, is willing to stand up for you and say, hey, we shouldn't pay people for committing crimes in America. We should not pay people for breaking our laws, for fundamentally disrespecting our nation. Not one Democrat. Not one. This came out and was introduced on November 4th, 2 days after the election. Not one Democrat is willing to put their name on this. And I'm showing it to you. H.R. 5854, you can track it yourself. So that's one of the things we like to do here is we want to give you the information. You don't have to take my word. You don't have to believe me. You can go and see it for yourself. This is what the Democratic Party is doing right now. They're going against you behind your back. And when someone says, let's put a law in front of you and let's have an up or down vote. Let's see what the people believe. What does America believe? Do the American people want to spend their money on illegal aliens? They won't give you that right. They won't put this up for a vote. Democrats will not put their names on this because they're worried about elections. They'll do it, and they are doing it. They just don't want you to know about it. They want to hide it from you. Dow says the same same Attorney General Garland that just had the FBI raid Project Veritas journalists, both current and former, and has considered declaring disgruntled parents as domestic terrorists. Yes, it is that very same individual. The very same Attorney General Garland who, when sitting in front of Congress in a congressional hearing, said that even though he did this based on partisanship, he got a letter from a partisan group for a partisan policy that was worked out with the White House. And when he got this, he put in place a policy for the FBI to go and investigate parents on 13 different federal laws to punish them and harass them and embarrass them for being involved in their children's education. That same Merrick Garland, who, when the evidence was shown that this was rescinded, that the partisan letter that motivated this was rescinded because it was outrageous, he said, no, I'm going to keep going. The FBI is going to keep searching for parents because they're involved with their kids in education. And just like Terry McAuliffe in Virginia, the Democrats believe, as they have said, as part of their policy, and they defended Terry McAuliffe for saying parents don't have a place in the education of their children. You don't have to believe me. Look up the quotes from Terry McAuliffe. We've covered it on this show. Even last week, before the election, we covered this. Terry McAuliffe said, it's on video. It's not, I'm not misquoting him. I'm not taking him out of context. When asked about parents being involved in the education of their kids, he said parents don't have a place. And Democrats, Kamala Harris was there backing him up. Joe Biden was backing him up. Stacey Abrams. There was Barack Obama. They all came down to back Terry McAuliffe as he said, parents don't have a place in education. Not one of them corrected him. This is a Democratic policy issue. This is where they want America to go. And if someone wants to tell me, and I'm open to any progressive, any Democrat, any conservative, libertarian, if you think I am wrong, please tell me how. We've shown you the quotes. We've shown you the video. I am drawing these conclusions from the major news media. Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me how I have misunderstood this. Because I want to hear that. I am sure people who are watching this will say, how are we misunderstanding this? How is this not oppressive? You have Attorney General Garland is stripping your rights to be able to teach your children, for you being able to raise your children. The government is micromanaging your life. They are micromanaging your children. They are growing them up. They are raising them. You don't have a place in that process. Even as those kids are being taught racism under the guise of CRT, critical race theory, the application of critical race theory, because the new thing is they don't know. No one's teaching them critical race theory. That's a college course. No, you're teaching them the applications of it. You're taking the principle of it, and this is how you're applying it. In the same way that we're not redistributing wealth when we give illegal aliens $450,000, or let's call it $50,000. They're going to give, oh, did I say something? Looks like the screen froze for a second. Yeah. I think I said something that the internet did not like. It looks like my feed is frozen. Are they going to kick me off? Nope, they didn't kick me off. They just froze it for a second there, folks. Wasn't me. But it seems they don't like what I'm saying right now. That redistribution of wealth, yeah, it's not just when they go, oh, well, we're going to redistribute, and it's ambiguous. No, the real world action. It is real world happening right now. They're taking your money and they're through the Justice Department or Department of Justice, and they are going to give illegal aliens, people who broke our laws, money. Your money. And that's redistribution of wealth. That's the application of it. That's the consequence of it. And now the consequence of raising your kids is in the hands of the government. It is the consequence of critical race theory, intersectionality, gender identity politics. They are taking it out of your hands. You don't have a choice. You don't have a voice. And I want to tell you, oh, it doesn't exist. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And let me just prove my point. This comes from Hot Air, a good program. My good friend Jazz Shaw works over there. Just so you know, I know some people at this organization. Indiana, November 4th. Indiana school administrator, you'd better believe we teach critical race theory and lie to parents about it. Oh, well, that's a surprise to someone, not me, not to many people who are watching this program, but yeah. As an administrator for the largest school district in Indiana, here's what we mean when we tell you we aren't teaching critical race theory. They're teaching the applications. They're teaching anti-racism. And they acknowledge, here's the thing, this is what they're teaching your kids, even in 5th grade. They keep rewording it, they water it down, but this is what they are teaching. Anti-racism acknowledges that racist beliefs and structures are pervasive in all aspects of our lives and requires action to dismantle those structures. Let's stop right there. As we hear from Hot Air, they mention it's that first assumption that leads to all sorts of mischief. Are racist beliefs and structures actually pervasive in all of our lives? Remember, critical race theory says that if you happen to be white, you are inherently racist and have white privilege and evil. And if you are not white, you are a minority. And by definition, you are inherently a victim. A victim. You are less than. By definition. Do you agree with that? Do you think that you are either an evil racist or less than other human beings? Because those are the only two choices that you get out of critical race theory. That's all you get out of intersectionality. That's all you get out of gender and identity politics. One group is better than another group. And if you happen to be in certain groups, you are inherently evil. No matter what you want to do. There's no choice about it. That is an absolute. And if you deny this, that makes you even more inherently racist because their logic is circular. The answer is, oh, you're complaining about this? That proves that you're a racist because there's no way out of this circle, out of this wheel, out of this echo chamber from the progressive mindset. There is only one answer, and the answer is they are right, and you must agree with them. You don't get to say anything else. They've already said everything that needs to be said because you're not smart enough. That's what they are trying to tell you. That's what's being pushed forward. Hot Air also goes on to say, who says they are, except for the critical race theory advocates? Does that apply equally to everyone, or is it dependent on their ethnic background? What role does intent play into this? And what role does grievance alone play? Where's the science-based evidence for this proposition in the first place? It goes even beyond that. Let me ask you, how many times have you heard this discussion before? Have you heard this on CNBC, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, the New York Times, the Huffington Post? Are they telling this to you? Have you considered that? Or have they told you critical race theory doesn't exist? Like Joy Reid on CNN. It doesn't exist. It's not true. There's no proof of that, even though we have seen the books. Like when we were discussing this with the school board in my local region of the southern tier of New York in March and in April, in the April school board meeting, where I spoke as well as many other individuals did, and said, wait a minute, we have the book in front of us. The book is teaching racism. It is teaching children that one group of kids are better than another group of kids. And that one group of kids who happen to be black are less than. That they are victims by birth. And it also taught to not trust law enforcement. The very same thing that they've been trying to pass for the last year, actually when they did pass it, in 22 states, 22 cities around the country, without the public voting on it. And what was the result? And in some cases, exponential increase in crime at levels we have not seen before, and in many places have not seen for decades. Exponential growth in violence and crime. Great example, New York State. We lost in New York City 600 police officers, just 600 detectives were taken off the job because they revisioned the police. They reevaluated how they were going to disperse the funding. They were going to reallocate money. These are the words that they use to try and not say defund the police. And what was the result? A spike of over 30% in crime, and especially in murders and homicides in New York City. And now we're told, don't worry, we're going to put in a pandemic medication mandate. That's right, a mandate. And that mandate is going to cost us 10%. 4,000 police officers are going to lose their jobs. But don't worry, it's going to be fine. That's not going to have any impact whatsoever. Even though when we lost 600 police officers, crime went up 30%. But we are the government, appointed Governor Kathy Hochul and Letitia James, the Attorney General, and Mayor Bill de Blasio, who are all running for governor under the Democratic ticket, and Mayor Eric Adams, who has declared himself a progressive. They all believe this is perfectly fine, that you have to be mandated, that the government should micromanage your personal health care, just like they should micromanage your children, because the government is smarter than you. And the fact that we're going to lose 4,000 officers will not have an impact. This is what they are telling you. It's not going to affect crime at all, even though we have evidence that shows you get rid of 600 and crime went up 30%. Let me ask you, do you actually think that's true? Do you actually think that they're right? That these things won't have any impact? That the government is smarter than you and should micromanage your health care and raising your kids and distributing your money? That the government should spend your money better than you do? Mike Bowie says, we should stop calling these people Democrats and start calling them communists for real. Well, I try to make it a difference. They are progressives. I try to make it clear. There are Democrats and then there are progressives. Democrats are like what we see in Congress, like I just showed you. And I want to be very clear about that. It's the Democrats in Congress voted against H.R., or rather are ignoring H.R. 5854. But it's progressives like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Terry McAuliffe and Stacey Abrams and Eric Adams in New York City and AOC. They're the ones who are trying to put in this socialist ideology. They're the Democratic Socialists of America, especially like those in the Ithaca chapter who believe in violence. They literally believe that it is violent for someone to say something that they don't agree with. Do you remember in 2020 when the Democratic Socialists of America, the Ithaca chapter, decided that they wanted to attack? They physically got into a fight on purpose with American citizens who were protesting because they didn't like what they were saying. And their goal was to silence these people by using force, an idea that is often being mentioned by members of progressive leaders of tomorrow and the far left. This is their ideology. If you are silent about something that they like, then that's a crime. And if you speak about something that they don't like, well, now you've committed a microaggression. Keyword aggression, which means you've attacked them. This is violence against them. And therefore, they get to respond with violence against you. That's also why they say silence is violence, because they get to then react against you. They get to use force against you to change what you are thinking, to change what you are doing. They are using these words very carefully. And they're using them very intelligently. They've thought this through. If you're silent and not saying yes to whatever it is they say, you have committed a crime. You have made an aggression against them. They can attack you for that. That is their mentality. That is the logic of what their words mean. That's the real world application of the saying. That slogan, silence is violence, is an excuse to be able to use violence against someone who isn't doing what they want. And when you speak and they say your words are violence, that if you offend someone that is in a microaggression or an aggression in general, then that is violence, and therefore someone can react violently. And I've seen this personally. We've seen this real world. I was with a group of protesters I was covering, as you've seen on this channel, and I'm going to get to the comments in 1 second. On this channel, you saw that I was covering the 4 vaccine mandate protests that happened, and the most recent one was in downtown Binghamton, New York. And we had an individual, a young man, about in his 20s, probably from college, who threw a rock at the protesters because he didn't like what they had to say. And then he just ran off. Now, charges are pending on that individual. The police are actively after him for committing that crime. But his answer is, well, he didn't like what we had to say. We offended him because we were having a peaceful protest, and I was recording a peaceful protest of people who said they don't agree with the overreach of the government. And rather than having a discourse, rather than having a conversation, rather than saying, even counter-protesting if he wanted to, rather than doing that, his answer, his first thought, his training from school was, oh, pick up a rock and throw it at these people because they've committed a microaggression. Therefore, I get to be an aggressor against them. I get to use violence against them because people's ideas are violent if I don't like them. This is the reality of what government micromanagement of your children and of your life equals. Let me get to some of the comments. By the way, folks, if you don't agree with me, no problem. 607-242-1582. You are more than welcome to call in and say, Mike, you just don't get it. The evidence is not there. I don't agree with the conclusions you're making based on the evidence that you are presenting. I'm more than happy to hear all of that. Just have a conversation. It's not violent. I don't consider it violent to have a conversation. Tell me you don't agree if you don't agree. If you don't want to talk, you can go to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, DLive, type in your comment. We are happy to hear your tweets, your chats, your phone calls. Let me get to the comments here. So Dow mentions that, says something when the people of New York City voted for a former policeman for mayor. Well, that former policeman is a progressive activist. He has said so. We, in fact, our last video that we just did, and you can see it on the show, is centered. He tells everyone that what he is a progressive. He is absolutely, his record, as he states, is progressive. Not that that's what he ran on. He ran on emotions. He ran to get people emotionally attached. But his record, as he said himself on MSNBC, or was it CNN, that he is a progressive. And that he wants to show people that progressivism can be practical. I don't know how he thinks he's going to do that, but that's his goal. That's the new slogan. Progressive is practical, which means they're going to do, which is the reaction to microaggressions is violence. Redistribution of wealth, give it to the illegal aliens. There are no borders, open the doors. You commit a crime, let people walk away. Don't charge them with the crimes if it doesn't match your political ideology. This is what he is supporting. This is what Democrats are supporting. And parents, you don't get to be involved in your kids' education. They're against that. And they will use the full force of government to keep you out of that loop. You don't get to have a say. They get to program your kids any way they want to, because government is more powerful than you. That is the progressive ideology. That's not democratic, that's progressive. And I don't think most people in New York City knew that, because he didn't run on that. He didn't run on progressive as practical. He didn't run as a progressive. He ran as an emotion. He's black, and he had a tough life. That's what he ran on. Those are his words. I am paraphrasing his words, but not his context. That is what he said. And we have video evidence of that. Jeremiah mentions to Dow's comment, I wonder where the Maslow's hierarchy of needs to be. I'll go to that. Dow mentions the government and its bureaucracies received a call like that letter to Attorney General Garland to take up power and authority to intervene. They see it as a mandate to reach for more power, and they do see that. Gregory Wright says, once you take the vaccine, I can't speak about that, Greg. It's not because I don't agree with you. It's that if I go into certain subjects, if I somehow mention the comments of other people that are negative, like if I even quote the CDC in an article from Reuters, or if I go to the CDC site itself and I quote their numbers, then I, on this channel, will get a strike. We have already had that happen. We quoted Reuters and YouTube shut down our channel for a week. So we have to be very careful, so I can't comment on that. Not directly. Dow mentions power is never released voluntarily. And yeah, Dow, I know a lot of people didn't know that Eric Adams is a progressive. He didn't run on that. He lied to people. He admitted it. Literally, the last video I did in talking about the elections, and as a matter of fact, I'm going to talk about the elections now in a second. The very last video I did, I have a full quote from him describing exactly what he ran on. And he details, I did not run on my record. I did not run. I am a progressive. I did not run on my record. I ran on my life, my background, being black, being poor, being disadvantaged. That's what he ran on. He ran on that emotional basis to connect with voters. And that, as he stated himself, is the way forward, because progressivism is practical, and that's what he's going to show people through New York City. These are his words. That is the context of what he had said, and we have video evidence to prove it. Not that the news media is paying any attention to that whatsoever, and they do not want to tell people that. But that's the reality. It's like our elections. There was a gentleman, and I'm not going to mention his name. I was contacted by a couple people about problems with the 2021 election, issues that they had encountered. I know that I personally spoke with the Board of Education, the Binghamton Board, the Board of Elections. I spoke directly with the Board of Elections on November 2nd. And it was because I want you to see what I was speaking to them about. Because this is one of the problems that we have. This is, so this image you see right now on the screen, that is an election site. This is the Trinity House at 180 Trinity Oak Street in Binghamton, New York. And this image is taken from the election location. And on the door is this sign. This is a violation of your rights. This is discouraging. When you hear Democrats say, oh, we have to fight discouraging voters, anything that would stop people from voting, this is what is discouraging voting. This is why about 25% of people actually voted in 2021. I don't think most people realize that. And I'm getting the final numbers from the Board of Elections to confirm that. But about 25% of voters actually came out to vote. And it's because of things, in part, besides the fact that no one has trust in our government, we have lost faith in our government because of what our government is doing both in 2020 and in 2021. But it's also because of things like this. Please be considerate and wear a mask, whether you are vaccinated or not, while in the building. Let me ask you, if you didn't have a mask, you walked up to that door to go in and to be able to vote, what would you say? Would you still walk into that door? Would you still think that you could go in and vote? I'm asking a very serious question. Do you think, would that message, if you did not have a mask in hand, perhaps because you were vaccinated, maybe you're not vaccinated, but you don't have a mask, which is not required by New York state law, that is not required by federal law, it is not a requirement of law anywhere, it is not a law, and you went to walk on out and you went to go and vote, and you saw this sign, would that stop you from voting? Would that make you say, I can't go in there? It's a very serious question. Because if the answer is yes, if you even hesitate, if you say that that would make you hesitate in front of that door, trying to decide whether you can or cannot go in, and what would be the repercussions of going in without a mask, if that even comes into your mind and you had that thought, then that has suppressed your vote. That has affected your ability to vote. And that is a crime in New York State. And guess who allowed that sign to be on the door? The New York State Board of Education. New York State Board of Elections, the BOE. The New York State Board of Elections, when they went down to that site, they were there in person, and they saw the sign. Hello, and thank you for calling into the program. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss. Who is calling in?
My name is Jeremiah.
Hey, Jeremiah.
How you doing?
I'm glad to have you on. And so, Jeremiah, we spoke, what would you like to talk about? Let me say it that way.
I just wanted to call in and give a personal example of, you started talking about the mask
Yes.
thing on your show just now, and I contacted you earlier in the week about something that happened to me personally, and
Yeah, I didn't want to mention that unless you wanted to. I didn't want to out you on that. So yes,
Right.
you did speak to me about this. Go ahead. Tell us what happened.
So I live up in Shenango County, and I'm a disabled gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
So my mother and I, we went to go vote later in the evening. I'd say a little after 8:00 p.m. on election night. We show up to vote. There's no signs on the door talking about masks or anything like that, but I don't wear a mask typically.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to go in to vote, I was stopped at the front doors of, I think it's called St. Bart's Church.
Right.
That's what the voting place was. And the two women that stopped me said that they came at me with basically opened a whole new box of masks and handed the whole thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't take it. And they said, sorry, you have to wear a mask to vote. And I was taken aback by it. I didn't get rude, but I stood, pretty firm in my ground. And I said, we can do one of two things here.
Mm-hmm.
You can let me in to vote, or you can give me a provisional ballot, and I'm going to fill it out right here.
Mm-hmm.
So then there's one lady, she was wearing glasses. She walked back into the voting area and huddled in the corner or whatever with a couple other people that were there. I guess they were poll workers or supervisors, I don't know. And while they were there talking, I couldn't hear them. The other lady stayed at the front with me, to make sure that I couldn't go in and vote. I brought my mom through. She was wearing a mask. That's her choice. I have no problem if you choose.
Right.
But and then finally the lady came back out and said, okay, we're going to let you vote. We're going to let you vote. Not, okay, yeah, come on in, it's fine. No, we're going to let you vote. But you have to wait here until it's empty, and you can only go over here in this corner and vote. As I was facing the front of the building, it'd be in the left corner. It doesn't really matter.
Well, no, it's important for people who know that location. It's very important. But Jeremiah, let me stop you for 1 second in this.
Yeah.
And I want to ask a very important question.
Mm-hmm.
In that moment, because you've just described to us, and we are not, as a channel, we're not saying you did or did not go through this experience. because I can't. But in that moment that you, as you have told us, you have been told first that you cannot do your lawful right of being able to vote. Then you are told, okay, we're going to allow you to vote only under certain very specific conditions. And you have been now placed on the side, shunned from society, and made to wait until an accommodation that these people in charge of the election process were there. Let me ask you, do you feel like that is affecting the way you voted?
Not the actual physical what I cast on the ballot per se, because it didn't change my thought process, my ideology, but like affecting my desire to want to go vote in the future not midterm,
Yes.
but midterm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm disabled. I walk with a cane. I got a severe breathing problem from a chemical burnt lungs, so it's difficult for me to get out and move around and spend time out and do things.
So it makes you feel less likely, or
Correct.
Let me not put words in your mouth, did it make you feel like, if this is what I have to go through, I'm less inclined to go out and vote again?
Yes. It was a struggle that day for me to go out to begin with, which is why I waited till later at night, and I said, you know what, let's just do it. Let's go. If I have to go through this every time, or even every other time, well, is it even worth it?
Okay. So that's your mindset at that moment. So
Yes.
what we know at that moment, as you said, is you've now been placed on the side, which is going to make you stand out, because other people are walking in and out and voting and looking over in the corner, I would imagine, because I would, and go, what's that guy doing over there? So now you're standing out. You're being ostracized. You have been targeted. You have been suppressed, because that, by definition, is suppression. What happened next?
So then I ended up eventually entering into the building, so there's two doors. There's the external door you come in, it's like a little foyer, and then you go into the main rec hall or whatever it's called. So I ended up going into the main rec hall, and I went over to the side where they said that they allowed me to vote without a mask on. And there was a different lady over there, and she's like, oh, you could sit in this chair, but you could only use this machine right here, which is the one over by where I was. Whether it was a designation for a ward or not, I have no idea. But specifically, hey, this is the one you can use, kind of don't go over anywhere else, just right here. Yeah, actually, in fact, sit right here in this chair and fill out your ballot here and put it in this machine there.
Okay, so let me stop you again, because I want to be clear about this for people who are listening. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you were brought into an area, you are isolated, you are told, you unlike anyone else who is voting, and I want to make sure I'm understanding this, so no one else was experiencing this isolation to get your ballot, to fill out your ballot, and an isolation to use a specific machine. Did anyone else use that machine besides you when you cast your ballot?
They said they let my mother do it, actually. They said you can use it because you're with him. But they turned other people, like there was another person that had tried coming in behind me, and they funneled the person away from me. They're like, no, come over here, go to this side, or come over here and use this machine. Come over here away from this, come over here away.
Oh my God. So they took you and they literally had you use a different machine and kept people away from where you were.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Which means that, so that's manipulation of your vote.
Thanks. I don't have any faith in the process, to be honest with you, but that's...
Well, I'm just understanding, and folks, if you think I'm wrong, and everyone who's watching and can comment on this, it sounds like this is not just, they went from suppressing your vote by isolating you to then manipulating your vote, because you are now put into another situation. You're being treated separate. And some would say separate and equal, which we know by law, because we've gone through this before with the Supreme Court, separate is not equal. We had a whole Supreme Court case about this. It's called the Civil Rights Movement. So, and this is why we have Justice Department trying to make sure that we don't do these things anymore, because they were like Jim Crow laws. And as an individual, and I don't know what color of skin you are, I don't care what your race is, ethnicity, I don't care. You don't have to mention it. It's not important to the question, to the discussion. But it's that same mentality as we saw in Jim Crow, where you have to go through special hoops and special treatment to be able to vote. And that was determined by law, and we have an entire division of the Department of Justice to fight against doing exactly what you're describing. If it's accurate, then that's illegal.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
I think it is illegal, but it didn't just end there, because after I was actually in the process of filling out the ballot, and the lady, not the two ladies at the front who first confronted me, but the lady who actually handed me my ballot, she was cordial and discussing, and she says to me, "I'm happy you came late, because if you hadn't have come late, we wouldn't have let you vote. There's so many fewer people in here, so there's not a risk to everybody. You're not a risk to everybody because there's so many fewer people in here. But if you had not come this late, we wouldn't have let you vote."
What?
Verbatim.
Okay,
Verbatim.
See, and I know because just so the audience watching, I know we've spoken by email
Yes, sir.
once before, and you told me this, and I was outraged then, and I'm outraged again in hearing it, because there is no way that is not illegal. What happened? That is an outrage.
I agree, and it upset me to the point. I mean, it had more than an effect on me, though, because see, when I have to remain calm, I need to be, not professional, but cordial and nice and calm, because if I'm not, then
That justifies their action, and they get to say, "Well, you're disrupting the peace, and therefore you can't." But
then
let me before we go any further, I got to mention something, because I am on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, DLive. The internet overlords,
yes, sir,
will require me to mention that we are neither confirming nor denying what you are saying. We are not indicating that anyone should not vote at any point. In fact, we are saying the opposite, that people should be allowed to vote, and that nothing should interfere with someone's ability to vote for whomever they want to vote for, which is something that this channel has always supported. We have never asked people to vote for any party or any ideology, though we do criticize certain ideologies and certain policies. So I want to be very clear about that, so that all the internet overlords know we're not trying to suppress anyone or to resist anyone or suggest any kind of interference. We're just highlighting what you are speaking to us about and making sure that it's clear for the public.
Yes, sir.
So I apologize. I need to mention that, because of otherwise, and I still could get another week or two being shut down because of this conversation, but we're going to have it. So keep going.
So then not only did it have like an impact on me at the time, and then afterwards, right? Frustration, upsetness, kind of like, what the hell? And then my mother, she was with me, right? And the conversation I had to her leaving the polling, actually, I got to say something else.
Yes.
Before I even got to that point.
Okay.
While I was putting the ballot into the machine scanner, there was a gentleman that came out from somewhere further back into the building, and the lady who told me that, if you had come earlier, we wouldn't let you vote, etc. She had to explain to him why I was voting without a mask, and one of the ladies from up front who initially confronted me came over and explained to him why I wasn't voting with a mask. And I had to, I guess he must have been someone, okay, this is an assumption. He must have been someone in charge, because they were trying to be very convincing and apologetic for the situation to him. Because when he came out, he was looking at me and started coming over towards me, and then these two women spoke to him, and I could overhear a majority of their conversation. He was quiet most of the time, just continued to look at me while they were explaining my presence there.
So they're being very deferential to this individual, but
Yes.
this seemed to be an individual of authority. Okay.
Yeah. So to me, it showed like a hierarchy of the whole situation, right? So you've got people that are doing their job, okay, and then you've got a person doing their job. Well, two women doing their job at the front, a woman doing her job at the with handing me the ballot and etc. And then somebody else comes in, and these people that were just doing their job are now going to this person and explaining why they were doing their job or why this was happening. So it just, to me, it spoke to of like a hierarchy of command or people in charge or something along those lines. I mean, that's neither here nor there, but to me it was like, oh, well, somebody in charge is here because you're reporting to them. So why is this still okay?
It's not okay at all. And this is aggravating to me. And I make the connection to Jim Crow because it's the same nature of action. It is still the same kind of suppression. It is still the same kind of intimidation. And we're seeing this in many aspects of our lives right now. Mm-hmm. And they're using now based on what you're describing, it would sound like that someone is using the pandemic medication mandates as a means to be able to dictate and micromanage your life and to punish you, not for breaking a law, because no law was broken, but to punish you for not doing what you were told.
Right. And not only punish for not doing, like the idea of punish for not doing what you're told or have like a cooling effect on election or right, but also, so this is the point I wanted to get to about when I was leaving, speaking with my mother, like we're leaving the polling place, walking out to the front, and I said to her, so hey, I wasn't like rude or gruff or upsetting, right? I just stood my ground. I was firm because she heard what I had said initially. Mm-hmm. She was like, no, you were fine, but you should have just put a mask on. It didn't matter. But to me...
But why comply? Why be forced to comply?
Correct. Why am I... And you could say, oh, it's defiant. Oh, you're not caring about... I'm not sick. I don't feel like I need to wear a mask if I'm not sick. And now you're telling me I can't vote unless I wear it. Come on.
Well, first of all, it's not a law.
Here?
It's not a law.
Right. How did we get here?
There's no requirement that you must wear a mask. There is no law that says you must have the pandemic medication, and there is no mandate for that by law. This is not something that was agreed upon by the public. We didn't have a referendum on this, nor was anyone instructed. By the way, I'm going to ask you about your experience here. I want to mention mine. Okay. So when I went and I saw the sign, you may have seen it in the video, when I went to the location to vote, mm-hmm. a gentleman was walking in, an older gentleman. He had a mask. He went to his car, got an extra mask, and gave it to me because he saw me reading the sign and my obvious displeasure and my hesitation at that moment, trying to figure out, well, what are they going to do? What's going to happen because of this? What are other people doing because of this? So he said, well, I get what you're saying, but I have an extra mask. So here's one for you. I walked in. I was able to vote. I asked the poll watchers there saying, okay, is this stopping people from coming in? They said they had no idea and that it wasn't a law. I talked to the Board of Education as soon as I walked out of there. And they promised that someone would have come down and look at the sign and possibly remove it. This is from the Board of Elections itself. Did you speak to the Board of Education? Board of Elections?
No, I called and I left a message. I'm going to call again this week. I've sent Facebook message to there's a congresswoman, I forget her name, in New York State. She said if there's any like you feel voter suppression or anything, contact me. I've sent a message to other people, but I haven't had any reply back other than speaking with you about it, sir. Okay, so
you're in the New York 22nd District.
Yeah, I'm up in Chenango County, yes, sir.
Right, so that means your Congresswoman is Congresswoman Claudia Tenney. Tenney. And so you should contact her offices and make them aware of this. I would say do it in writing as well as in phone. Not because I don't think they won't listen, but you want to have duplication and a record that shows, hey, I contacted you on X day to make you aware of this situation, and to ask for what can be done about this situation. I would also say write a letter to the Board of Elections to also make them aware.
Oh, not just call. You're saying writing a letter, so that way there is the documentation that got sent, or you received.
You can do it with email. Email is accepted nowadays as well. You're going to keep a record of that. This way it shows exactly a timestamp of when you sent it, what kind of response you got back. It's all official. You can keep that on the side. And this way you can document what is and is not being said in completeness to your issue, your allegation, as they would call it, about this. I expect that people would have a response, and they should have a response. Our elected leaders must have a response, and if they don't, we can then hold them accountable because you have the proof, not just your word here today. Again, we don't dispute what you're saying, but we can neither confirm nor deny.
Right. But it's like anything else. It's almost like being in a legal proceeding. People can say something, but until you have more than just one person saying it, like proof that it happened, or a response acknowledging that it happened, or witnesses.
You have witnesses. Now, if they're doing their job, they should investigate this. They'll probably ask your mother. They'll probably ask the poll workers. And they'll go into it. But that's what they're supposed to do. And I know that when I made my call, which I have the timestamp recorded, and I know exactly, but I have a different medium. I'm a member of the press. I'm making it aware to everyone the experience I went through. But this is the part of the problem that we need to address. Because while everyone in the news media is talking about, well, people of color are having their votes suppressed, they're not talking about, but people who may or may not be vaccinated, and again, that's your private health care. You don't have to tell me. It doesn't matter. You may or may not, but like the sign that I experienced and addressed and I took a photo of, people are being suppressed and they're being intimidated because, you're not complying. Compliance is not a prerequisite for voting. And that's a problem. And that is the problem right there.
Yeah. Well, it never used to be a requirement for voting. Unfortunately, it seems like it.
Not since the Jim Crow laws. And supposedly we had fixed that from the 1960s. And looking at the voting rolls in most states, like in Texas, where 64% of registered voters who actually go out to vote are white, and 65% of registered voters who actually go out and vote in Texas are white, and 64% who actually go out, who are registered and go out and vote, are black. It works. We've corrected a lot of these problems. People are voting at about the same levels. But I have to wonder, is your experience so unique? Is my experience so unique when we look at the fact that the voting numbers, as best as I can understand, 25% of people voted in 2021.
Which is low.
It's extremely low. Normally, in an off year, in the odd years, it's normally like 35-ish, 37%. The initial numbers at the moment look like 25, maybe 27%. Is it because people were going through the experience you had, the experience I had? Is this why 10% of people didn't show up that normally do? It's a really troubling question.
I can't speak for other people, but I can tell you that initially, that when I'm first confronted by, hey, you need to wear a mask to vote, then someone holding a package of masks in your face, you kind of, well, I want to vote, so I should probably put it. It's like the first thought, but no, I'm not putting a damn mask on. I don't have to put a mask on to vote. So I'm sure if there were people that were less steadfast in their position or more, didn't want to cause a stir or afraid of confrontation, I'm sure that I can't say I'm sure, that they probably would be turned away, because I can understand why I would have been turned away if I wasn't steadfast in my position.
And you should never be put in that position. No one should be put in that position. That is my personal statement. That is the statement of this channel. No one should have to go through this. That is wrong, and we believe it is illegal. It is definitely immoral, and needs to be spoken about. And more people need to find out about this. And I put in a comment before, and I want to say to everyone again, if nothing else, clip this video, clip this live stream after it's done, send this out to people, or tell people right now to share this with people on all social media and have them react to this. This is wrong, and it's being pushed by the government. This is coming from the Board of Elections. This is coming from our election process. There is a problem here, and we need to be shouting at the top of our lungs saying, this is unacceptable. I think this is unacceptable what happened to you, Jeremiah. I think this is insane, and it's infuriating to me. And
Well, the same thing with you having a sign. You didn't have someone standing at the front door saying, don't come in. But in essence, you had an extension of somebody standing at the front door saying, don't come in.
Well, it's the full power of the government saying, don't enter this location unless you comply.
Yep.
And I was made to feel that I had to comply. And yeah, I did argue afterwards. I did take off the mask afterwards, but that was after the fact. What about people? And I'm a pretty, when it comes to politics, well, generally in life, I'm a pretty authoritative, I'm a pretty open, and some would even say confrontational individual. Fair enough. So yeah, I'm going to challenge the authority on something that I think is illegal. Most people don't.
Yeah.
That is uncommon. You, Jeremiah, are uncommon. Most people would walk away. And that's not good for America. That's not good for democracy. That's not good for our way of life, our society. It has so many problems on so many levels. And I feel really bad that you had to go through that experience.
Yeah. I hope it wasn't. I hope it was a two-off situation, yours and mine. But I've got a feeling it wasn't.
It wasn't. It wasn't. I've heard from other people with other issues during the 2021 election. Various, not necessarily our experiences directly, but others. But again, how many people walked up to that location? I can tell you that they were down about 30% in terms of in-person voting at that location. I know it. It's my regular location. And I know the total number of votes in that location. It was down about 20, 30%. The only difference I see is there was that sign. And I have to wonder, how much did that add to it? Besides the fact that people were generally pissed off with the government and voting.
Yeah. It was a unique year.
Yeah. Well, it's upsetting. Now, Jeremiah, I want you to stay in touch with us on this channel.
All right.
As you get responses, please write the letters to the Board of Elections, to Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, asking for some follow-up on this. We've already put some documentation of our own out there so that we can follow up on this, because that's the only way. We have to hold them accountable.
Right.
And we have to act on it. So as long as you're acting on it, we can then follow up on it and say something needs to be done, because this should never happen again.
Yeah, I'll keep you apprised of the situation, and I appreciate you being willing to hear hearing about my experience.
No, absolutely. That's what this program is about, because these are important issues. It affects us all. I mean, the next time could be me, could be someone watching this program, could be someone a progressive, it could be a libertarian, it could be anyone for any reason, because if they can do it for the reasons we experienced, what else can they pick out and go, well, you didn't wear a tie today. I don't like your sneakers. Your pants are saggy. You're a woman. You're gay. You're not a woman. You're not gay. You're not trans. It could be any reason.
Yeah. Anything could be a reason for I guess it would be almost, would it be disenfranchised? it'd be suppression. It wouldn't be
Yeah.
disenfranchisement. It'd be suppression.
Well, it would be both.
Okay.
It would be both. But that's going a little more into the legality of it. But you know what? If I don't mind. If I have to go to court for that, I don't mind. If this is something that, and I want the major news media to cover this, and they won't.
No.
Folks, you're watching this right now. The major news media knows about this. I've spoken to people. I have contacts, many of them in the major news media. They won't touch this story. They're not going to push this forward. They're not going to tell you about this, and they don't care. Especially since they're going to say, well, it's moot because we already voted. Let me ask you one other thing, Jeremiah, before I let you go, and other people can call in with their thoughts. But let me ask you this. Do you feel like this is moot now because you voted?
No.
Do you
I feel
it's over now?
No, because two reasons.
Mm-hmm.
One, the area that I'm in was typically, I mean, it's more rural and it's, more typically right-leaning, right? But for this to happen in an area that's supposedly more conservative, more right-leaning, that makes me wonder, well, wait a minute. There's no law saying you have to wear a mask to vote, but you're saying you have to wear a mask to vote. It makes me confused. And then the second thing is, why, like, what's going to happen next time, or what's going to happen when it's like a national election and the
like the midterms in 2022?
Yeah, right. It's like, what's going to happen then?
That's supposed to be one of the big votes. So
yeah,
what would they do when the Democrats are on and because they're the party in power? But you say this for Republicans as well, or any other party. So I don't want it to be isolated to that.
No.
But what happens when the next big election comes out? You're deciding who's going to have control of the House of Representatives, the Senate, and or the presidency, and then all of a sudden this happens. What happens then?
Bad things happen because you turn, but you don't just turn people. Like, I could see this. You could turn people off from voting for more than one election. Like, you could make people, well, if I'm going to get harassed when I go to vote, I'm not going to vote. The hell with this. My vote doesn't count anyway. That's the excuse a lot of people I speak to use.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not voting because it doesn't count, right? One vote doesn't matter. But now on top of that, you hear that often. But now, when I go there, I'm going to get harassed and I'm going to get set off to the side. I'm going to get made to stand there and wait, even though you got a cane and can barely walk, and then set off to the side somewhere to vote. Come on.
Yeah, that's again. It multiplies. The problems multiply as you think about it.
It's definitely not over. And the fact that, like, you mentioned Jim Crow laws. Well, you go, like, every time, right? You go, like, so when there was the after the Civil War, the Emancipation Proclamation and all that, right? But then there's Jim Crow laws, and then there's Martin Luther King Jr. time, and then it just goes on and on and on, and it's always, okay, well, we'll concede and let's try this. Okay, we'll concede and let's try this. Okay, we'll back off and let's try this. And now it's, well, what's it going to be? If there's enough outcry about saying, oh, you have to wear a mask to vote, maybe they'll back off of it. They're going to try something else. So the point's not moot. And it doesn't matter who it is. To me, it doesn't matter if you vote blue, if you vote red, if you vote orange. The fact is, your vote should count, and your vote shouldn't be suppressed, and you shouldn't be turned away or made to make an arbitrary decision. Say, oh, if you want to vote, you have to wear a hula hoop tomorrow. No.
Again, it's unreasonable. It's wrong. It is an intimidation tactic. It is suppressive. It is all the things that are wrong that we are, as a nation, have been saying cannot exist. And yet, under this circumstance, with this excuse at the moment, it is happening. And that is a problem.
Yeah.
And I thank you, Jeremiah, for bringing this up to all of us, for at the very least a discussion and a thought that people must take into mind, and I hope to see some further action. Is there any final thing that you wanted to mention? Because I do want to open up the line in case others want to call in and speak about this.
No, sir. I just wanted to say thank you for hearing what I had to say and appreciate your responding. Thank you for your time.
Oh, absolutely. And please do watch the channel. Let us know your thoughts about everything. And as I said, we're going to continue to stay in touch with you to follow up on this as this further develops. Okay?
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. So, folks, that was just Jeremiah, an individual who was speaking about this problem. And this problem, this is an issue. And for those who are wondering and saying, well, Mike, it really wasn't that bad, it didn't have any impact, how do we know? I want you to understand, and I want to show you this. This is from the Board of Elections, the Binghamton Board of Elections, Broome County Board of Elections. And it's showing the votes here. And as you can see, there's 32,000 for the Broome County clerk. There were 6,953 votes for the Binghamton mayor's race. Doesn't matter who you voted for. Doesn't matter what you wanted to vote for. I don't care. This is not left or right. It doesn't matter. These are the totals, unofficial totals, as we understand them at this moment. I want you to see something. This is 2017. This is coming from Press Connects, the official final numbers. The county clerk, if you look at this number, 15,000 plus 19,000, so that's going to give you 34,000. There were 400, so 35,000 votes. 35,000 votes for the county clerk. Looking at the city of Binghamton mayor's race in 2017, there were 8,600 votes. Let me show you again. This is 2021. 32,000 votes for the county clerk, 6,900 for the city of Binghamton. You're looking at over a 10% decrease. This is at the same time that we are being told we have made it more transparent and more open. We've given more people the opportunity to go out and vote because we have to. We have to give people the ability to mail in votes and to vote early. We started voting 10 days early, which we didn't do in 2017, because we're told if we do these things, people will go out and vote. They're going to be more excited to go out and vote. No, they're not. No, they're not. Especially when we are introducing, as you see on the screen, limitations on who is voting and how they're voting. When we are being told implicitly that you must comply to be allowed to vote, to go through the experience that Jeremiah went through, to go through the experience that I went through, and to hear from the Board of Elections when I spoke to them directly, and they say, well, we'll get to it. We'll fix that eventually. I'm telling you, there is a problem here, and this is a big problem. And when they promise you, don't worry, the problem isn't what we're doing, what hoops we're making you jump through. They're telling you the problem is, well, it's because black people are being stopped. It's because of racism. Racism's the problem. It's because white people are the problem. No, it's not. That's a lie. Compliance is the problem. The government micromanaging your life is the problem. Making people jump through hoops that are unnecessary and unlawful, in our opinion, is the problem. And if someone disagrees with me, if they disagree with the experience that they just heard from Jeremiah, my experience, as I just detailed to you, the image that I have shown you, the evidence that I am presenting to you, if you disagree with that, that's okay. Tell me why. Tell me how I am incorrect. Explain to me what you have just heard from Jeremiah, what you have just heard from my experience, the evidence I have shown you. Let me ask you, how am I incorrect in the conclusion that I am making? How is it made better? We had 10 days early voting. At the same time, we had signs like the one I have just shown you on the doors to vote. We have these restrictions that are on individuals, like Jeremiah has just expressed to you. How is that not causing an issue. Is that the reason why we saw a 10, 20% decrease, possibly 27% voter turnout versus the historic 35%? What explains that? Because everyone has lost faith and confidence and trust in our election system? Because we are watching a government that is inefficient and inept, that has lied to us repeatedly? The Biden administration lied to you. It's not even a if, it's not a maybe, it's not a misconstruction, it's not a buzzword. This is a fact. You were told in June, you were told that America would get all Americans out of Afghanistan, period. And that if we had to stay longer, we would keep troops there to get every American out. On August 18th, as we documented on this channel, we showed you General Milley going as he, or Milley, whatever his name is. We showed you when he said, oh, any American who wants to get out of Afghanistan. Then on September 1st, we listened and we showed you as Joe Biden said, oh, we took everyone out that wanted to leave. And there's only a couple hundred people who might be still in Afghanistan. And then we found out on October 27th that 450 Americans were discarded, thrown to the side, and not spoken about ever again. We've shown you the letters that we have done, that we have sent out to Antonio Delgado, the congressional representative of the New York 19th District, asking him for 60 days to even mention the name of the Americans that are left in Afghanistan, to even mention the subject, a subject that the White House, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Antonio Delgado, they won't even mention this to you. They won't bring up this subject, and the news media will not address what I believe is one of the most outrageous things we have ever heard. That Americans have been discarded and forgotten about, and they don't exist, and there are at least 4 times as many as we were initially led to believe. At least 400% more Americans were discarded in Afghanistan with no way home than we have ever been told before. And I have no reason to believe that the number isn't even larger than the 450 that the government, that's the Department of Defense, that's the Homeland Security, that's the White House. We now know that they've been lying to our faces, and we have no reason to believe that the number's not even larger than this lie. In 3 or 4 months, we might find out that it's 4,000 people, which I think is closer to the true number. And no one's going to notice because it'll be a byline in the news and they'll just forget about it. And by the way, you have to comply. Because the big thing is, you have to comply. We're worried about climate change today. And tomorrow, we're worried about the pandemic medication mandates. And you have to comply. Because if you don't, you won't be able to go to work, you won't be able to pay bills, and you cannot collect unemployment, even though you are unlawfully and wrongly fired because of your religious beliefs, your personal, your medical history, and or your desire to live according to the Constitution of the United States. You don't have to agree with me, folks. I'm not trying to turn you into a conservative. I'm not trying to turn you into a progressive or a libertarian or a Democrat or a Republican. I'm not trying to change your political preferences. I am making you aware of the inept, absolutely inefficient, and corrupt nature of the government that is going on right now and the way that you are being manipulated. From Eric Adams in New York City, as he is saying, hey, don't pay attention to my record. Don't worry that I follow a progressive ideology. Just remember, I'm black and I had a troubled life. You should vote for me because of emotion and racism. That's the distraction. That's the way they are getting us to comply. You're going to do it because if you don't, you won't be able to work. You won't be able to feed your family. You have to do what the government says because the government is smarter than you, so you don't get to be involved in your kids' education And if you're involved in the school board, if you speak up, guess what? The full force of the government with the FBI is going to come down on top of you to embarrass you, to ostracize you, and to punish you for doing what you legally and by birth have a right to do. Please, if you think I'm wrong, Jeremiah just called in. You can call in too. 607-242-1582. I didn't know that Jeremiah was going to call in. I'm happy that he did because I was going to talk about it anyway, but I think it's important for you to hear what he has to say about it. And the phone lines are open. By the way, if you agree, you can always call into the show as well. By the way, we do appreciate it. And if you've made it this far into the program, we hope that you will consider subscribing, by the way. Like, share, subscribe. We definitely say share this episode. Share this with other people. Because I think these are important issues. These are important things to talk about. Yeah, and Dow, you're right. And by the way, I see many of the comments that were in there from you hot chicks. By the way, hello, hot chicks. Mike Bowie, Dow Grimm. Everyone, I see your comments, and I thank you for commenting on this. This is important. If there is any episode you would ever share with someone, share this. Give them the timestamp. Tell them when the call started and when it ended. Let them see this for themselves to understand we are in a dangerous part of America. This point in America is troubling. It's worse than troubling. We're in danger. America as it existed for the last 200 plus years is in danger. Our lives, our future is in trouble, is in danger. Our kids are going to grow up and they are never going to be as free as we are right this second. Because they are being taught critical race theory, they are being taught to comply. That's what I believe, you may disagree, I believe that the entire pandemic medication mandates are about compliance. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's about teaching the 5-year-olds and the 8-year-olds and the teenagers to comply. Because in 5 years, maybe 10 years, they're going to be voters. And they're only going to know, do what the government says. Because if I don't do what the government says, I will be punished. Not for breaking a law, but for not doing what you were told. For not being in compliance. See, we are still fighting at this moment. In fact, it was, and Dow brought it up, the actual bills. Did you see the terms? And I have it here, and I want to bring it up for you. And bear with me, folks. Because there were the propositions in New York State that we all voted on. And we rejected wholesale. We rejected propositions 1, 3, 4. We got rid of them. And we said, no. What were they proposing to us? We're going to change the laws. We're going to make it, because we want to make it easier for people to comply. Not to vote, to comply. We want more people to vote. Notice, people, not American citizens, people. Illegal aliens. Those people who came in from Haiti, they can vote. You're from El Salvador. You're from North Korea. You're from wherever else in the world. You came into the United States illegally. We let you across the border. New York State said, here's a driver's license. By the way, go online, register to vote. Now they're voting. That's about compliance. Who they're going to vote for. What are they going to do? And we have a lot of these politicians that are doing these kinds of things to us, that are using us. I'll give you another example. You may recall back in April of this year, April 2020, where when everyone was talking about the Chauvin trial, and we had individuals like Salka Valerio, who is a Binghamton resident and a member of BLM, Black Lives Matter. Not only that, also a member of Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow. This individual, who is also responsible for conveying and helping individuals traveling, criminals, stolen guns, who also has a warrant, 2 counts of criminal of possession of a weapon. This is in my local community. Same person, Salca Valerio of Binghamton. She's driving a car. She's got a criminal in her car who's holding onto a stolen .40 caliber Beretta. You know what? I'm not upset with Salca Valerio because she was driving the car and didn't know that this person had a warrant. I am upset that, and I think it's something to be held accountable, that she had an individual in her vehicle with a gun that is unregistered and was not, this is from Salca Valerio herself, okay? And I want you to be very clear about this, folks. Salca Valerio is the BLM, the Citizen Action, Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow. These were the people who were telling us, you don't have a right to a Second Amendment. You don't have a right to have a firearm. You don't have rights because you have white privilege. This is their message. This is their ideology. This is their demand that we comply with their feelings for their power. And every time that they do this, we turn around and we find out that these individuals, like Salca Valerio, go on out there and they violate the very laws that they said. Here she is. She's got an individual who has a gun. Even if you want to tell me, and this is, again, someone who ran for Binghamton City Council, running as a progressive, backing up all the progressive ideology, including being to deny you your Second Amendment rights. And this individual who says you can't have a firearm is transporting a criminal with a stolen firearm that is not a complete safe weapon, that isn't legally registered. They're supporting the very crimes they're holding against you that aren't illegal. Perfectly legal to own a firearm in New York State. You and I can own firearms. Here she is supporting someone who's breaking that law. And their answer is, no, the thing that you need to do is you need to go out and you need to just comply. Just comply. Because the problem isn't BLM. It isn't the progressive ideology. It's not complying with the government. No, the problem is climate change. The problem is people who don't comply. It's people who don't acknowledge that they are racists or victims by birth. It's insane. And we're expected to follow these propositions that are being put out in the law, like Proposition 2, which Dal is mentioning. Do you remember that? Does anyone even know what that meant? New York State, you now have the right. In New York State, you have the right to clean air. Okay, when did we not have that right? You have a right to clean water. Well, who defines that? And how is that going to be done? And what do you do to people who don't provide you that? Mind you, I don't think it was the biggest proposition. It's Proposition 2. And it changed the New York Constitution and said, hey, you have a right. A right. Rights are supposed to be imbued by God, our Creator, by birth, by existence. So whether you're an atheist or you have a certain type of religion, it's a creator or just your birth. By existence, as an American citizen, you have certain imbued rights that are beyond the ones listed by the government or listed in the Constitution. You have many rights. Read the 9th Amendment. Your rights are not just what they mentioned in that document, it's everything. Your rights are eternal and endless until you give the government power. And now the government has the power to not only say, Well, you should have clean air and clean water. And we're going to define how you get to have that clean air and that clean water. And we get to define what is a violation of that clean air and that clean water. That's dangerous. Because again, we've opened the door for the government to micromanage our lives. And we've set up a scenario where the government is giving us rights, not acknowledging we already had that. We already had a right. If you want to say that clean air, clean water is a right, okay, you've already had it. Look at the Ninth Amendment. Look at the Constitution. Look at the Declaration of Independence. You already had that right. The government didn't need to write it down for it to exist. It always existed. But now the government has control of how you're going to exercise that right, how you're going to be able to live with that right. They get to define who's in compliance with that right. Do you see the difference? I don't know if I'm explaining it well. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. You already had this right. The government now said this right only exists under a certain framework. They get to control that right. They get to control how you express that right. The government just got more power. And you have no idea what they're going to do with it. Because the government, especially under the Biden-Harris administration, the Biden-Harris administration will lie to your face, just like they did with Americans in Afghanistan. The Biden-Harris administration will go around, and as we were covering before, they'll lie to you and they'll say, well, we may or may not be giving money to illegal aliens. That's your tax money for actually because they broke the law, and we're going to give them a reward and encourage more illegal aliens to come into this country. Why would you trust the government that's willing to do that? Why would you trust them with defining what is clean air and clean water? And that they're going to protect it for you. What are they protecting? These are the same people who are saying, just like Salca Valerio, these are the same people who are saying you don't have a right to protect yourself. Ninth Circuit Court out of California decided that you don't have a right to protect yourself the moment you walk outside of your door. The moment you walk out your door, you no longer have a right to defend yourself. That was from the Ninth Circuit Court. Because you don't have a right for a firearm to be able to defend yourself outside your home. No, that's the police and the government. They're responsible for protecting you the moment you walk outside your door. And yet, they're not. They're defunding the police. They're letting crime go up by 20, 30%. They're perfectly fine with the fact that their very same mandates, their very same desire their requirement to comply may lead to thousands. It's already lost us tens of thousands, about 33,000 doctors, nurses, and healthcare workers have already been lost. It has already hurt our healthcare. People cannot get surgeries, cannot go out and get their healthcare because we don't have the doctors anymore. We're about to lose police throughout this state, thousands of them, and we know that it only takes a couple hundred to increase crime by multiples, and yet they're the ones who are protecting you. They're going to take care of you. They're going to lie to you. They're going to run you around in circles, not telling you the truth, not telling you the information you need to know. And the news media is perfectly fine to have that happen. And you're supposed to trust it? Jeremiah says, the state of Maine passed a proposition that people have a right to grow and raise their own food. New York State gives us a right we already have. It seems like it's a prerequisite for carbon taxes, outlawing lead, de facto ammunition, ban. Other options are considered armor penetrating, tungsten, steel, and other agendas. It was definitely a loaded question on Proposition 2. It was a loaded question. Just like they said they wanted to change the redistricting. People were aware of that. It was obvious that they wanted to change the rules on redistricting so that they can maintain power. Well, this is Proposition 2 is the same thing. They're maintaining power. As you just made a great example there, Jeremiah, we have a right to grow food on our property. We have a right to property. We have a right to grow food on our property. The government doesn't give us that right. We already have it. We already have that right. The government wants to give us the right to have clean air and clean water. We already had that right. But now they get to define things. Oh, time for a carbon tax. Why? Because you're breaking someone else's. The government has defined what clean air is. And you have a car. And that car runs on gasoline. Carbon tax. You have a house, it doesn't have solar panels. Carbon tax. You're using gas for your heat, not electric. Carbon tax. You went over your allotment of energy for the month. Doesn't matter that it's the middle of winter. Doesn't matter that there's a cold snap. There's a blizzard going on because we live in the upstate Northeast. You went past your carbon tax allowance, your energy allowance. How dare you? You got to pay for that, tax you, because you're going to comply. And if you don't, you're going to be punished. If you think I'm being outrageous, if you think that the suggestions I am making here are somehow not correct, please tell me why. Tell me how the conclusions that I'm coming to don't make sense. Where is the logic I'm missing? Because all I'm doing is I'm going off of what they have told us already. I am actually listening to the politicians. I am reading the laws and the bills that they are putting in place. Hello, and thank you for calling No Soundbites Allowed. I am your host, Michael, and with whom am I speaking? Hello?
Hello.
Yes,
Mike?
I hear you.
Hey. Yes, this is Delgrim. Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm calling into the show because you were talking about the propositions, and you've actually hit on a lot of the points that I was going to talk about with the verbiage and everything. The Tioga County, which is an agricultural county,
Yeah.
voted for Proposition 2.
Right.
And it really makes me scratch my head. I mean, even though I'm not sure how the rest of the state voted for Proposition 2. You had said earlier in the show that everybody had basically denied the propositions wholesale. So
Most of them, not Proposition 2. We had
not Proposition 2.
Not Proposition 2. New York State, excuse me, in Proposition 2 across the state, it was about 27% of the voters came out statewide and voted on the propositions. And I'm just going to show it on the screen right now. This is from the New York State Board of Elections. And the total were 3.1 million people, excuse me, who voted on Proposition 2, the right to clean air, water, and health environment, whatever that means. A healthful environment. I don't know what that means. There is no definition of that. And 60.82%, almost 61% of people in New York voted for it, 1.9 million. 859,000 voted against it. A total of 3.1 million votes were registered in total. And I guarantee you, no one, I guarantee you, I don't think there's anyone who knows what a healthful environment means. No one knows what that means.
Right. Well, do you remember when there were back in the beginning of Trump's administration. He was talking about deregulating the EPA, and everybody was up in arms because they're like, oh my God, the environment's going to suffer because we don't have a government regulation, a government agency regulating what people do to the environment.
Yeah.
And what really amazes me is the idea that of all the countries in the world, Americans tend to be the most concerned with conservation of resources.
Yeah.
And this goes all the way back to Theodore Roosevelt with his
state parks.
State parks and such. Mm-hmm. So the idea has been ingrained in people that we need to protect the natural resources of our country, and that's one of the things that we have practiced forever. Why does a government need to be in regulation over people who already practice, for the most part, good sense when it comes to our natural resources?
Because the government has to be in charge of all that. The government has to decide that.
And that's why when you look at some of these propositions, and I had mentioned it previously, I think before when you had suggested that I call in, mm-hmm. You see these propositions and the way they're worded, and if nobody looks too hard at them, and this goes to like the phrase "low information voter." Mm-hmm. If you look at these, and you would see, say, like in Proposal 1, where it says that they're going to delete certain provisions that violate the United States Constitution, okay, in accordance with the amending of the appointment and redistricting process. People would see that sentence and they're like, wait, there's something involved with violations of the United States Constitution? Of course we need to get rid of that. Mm-hmm. But if you go on to read it, you realize that they're talking about they're not specific. They're talking about some vague violation that is going to be later defined. I mean, if you're going to put a proposal in place, whether it be Proposal 1, Proposal 2, Proposal 3, you would think that a government that is actually held to a standard by the people would be specific enough to be able to say, all right, we need clean air, clean water, and a healthful environment. We want to put these specific actions in the Constitution so that they can remain inviolate and never be crossed.
Your expectation of the government is far, far greater than mine, because look at red flag laws and the definition of what is a deadly instrument. There is no definition of that. It is practically anything. Go ahead.
Well, what I'm saying is that that's what you should expect from your government.
Yes.
That in an ideal situation, you should be able to expect that your government, who is being held to standard, is going to be transparent. The problem is like you were saying with compliance, we have been trained as a population. Mm-hmm. And this goes for everybody, myself included. Growing up, I heard it for years. We are trained through public education, through how our culture is designed, to comply because we're being asked to relinquish the responsibilities that come with being an individual to another party, which is the government. Mm-hmm. And when it's all said and done, the one day we realize that we're voting on these proposals, it's out of our hands. How are you supposed to feel about that?
Well, that's the problem, is they want us to feel. See, there's my problem right there. It's like what we heard from Eric Adams. It's about feelings. We've heard that from the far left over and over again. Their feelings, what is it that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said that now is very popular? My truth. There is no such thing as my truth. But yet we hear this often all the time from news media. My truth. There is no my truth. Truth is objective. Right. There is a truth, and then there's our conclusions, which are subjective. So
Correct.
We've changed the idea. We're so focused on feelings, and this is the road to hell, because they're distracting everyone with, well, doesn't it feel good? You feel good with the idea of clean air, clean water. Yeah, what about the consequences? What does that mean? What's a healthful environment? Healthful for who? That's a big question.
Right. And I think that's what Rich Pertel was alluding to when he was writing about how the second proposal was going to be the most dangerous of them all, because it gives a broad authority, essentially, to define these things. And as we know, the left is very good. The left is very good at manipulating definitions.
And using
they
broad...
just keep plugging away. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like you were saying earlier with aggression. The aggression used to mean you were being aggressive in the sense of some sort of physical action. That's what it used to mean. You were aggressively pursuing something. You were physically acting on
you were forced. You were applying a force to something. Yes.
Right. You were applying a force. When you're having a discussion, even if it's a heated discussion, it's still a discussion. It's not an aggression. And the change in the definition of what it is to be aggressive leads you down the road to things like phrases like toxic masculinity. Well, what's toxic about it? Well, it's because you're aggressive. No, I'm upset because we're trying to have this discussion, and you're the one that's trying to use violence on me to suppress me. So who is the aggressor? Well, it's not me. I'm the victim because you're causing microaggressions against me. That kind of definition changing is what I think a lot of people have a hard time combating, because they don't know what to do with it. Words don't mean what they used to mean, even in legal law, like lawfare. I never heard the term lawfare until there was an instance where we had an instance where CPS was called. Okay.
Right.
And they used to come to the house like every 6 months.
Yeah, at least.
And we're like, what are you doing here? Why are you here? And we got to the point where we kind of knew where it was coming from. I mean, it was like a family dispute that kind of we ended up eventually taking care of, and it got better. But when I asked the social worker who kept showing up, I'm like, look, this is like the 6th time you've been here. Is there no redress for us?
No.
Because every time you show up, you go through the procedure, and this person actually recognizes us by face. We got on a first name basis with this person, and they're like, oh, guess who called again? And you know what it was? It was the homeschooling.
That's all it takes.
It was the homeschooling.
Well, it could have been because of the red flag laws. Again, no one thinks about the consequences of these. And to give another example of what we're talking about, make it a little more for people who aren't quite getting it. Imagine this. The red flag laws were, quote, designed to reduce crime and to stop people who are dangerous to themselves and others. They like to say that it would reduce suicide, which it doesn't. There is no proof of that. There is no data. But in part of that, it means that they now have used that law to take children from parents. That is a fact. I have spoken to assembly members, state legislators, people in government at every level of government. It's a fact. They use this law to take children from parents because you were dangerous And what does that actually mean? It means the government gets to punish you. By the way, no law has ever been broken. People who are given the red flag laws, they've never broken a law, but they're still punished anyway. So we get these vague rulings. And as much as I agree with Rich Bertel, by the way. Rich is a friend of the channel, for people who are unfamiliar with his name. He's a candidate for legislature in Tioga County of New York, and he's been on this program before. We've interviewed him. And while I agree with Rich that this is a problem, Proposition 2, I won't say it's the most dangerous. I still think the voting laws that we did vote down, those changes were more dangerous because it makes it legal to do these kinds of things behind people's backs.
And that I would agree with. I would agree with that. But I think from where he was speaking was of the propositions that were passed, all of them should have been voted no.
Yes.
In his opinion.
Yeah, I
all
would agree
of them
with
should
him.
have been no.
I agree with him.
But it shocked us, especially those that reside in Tioga County, how many people who live in an agricultural county are willing to vote for something that would allow the government to further regulate what is done on their property.
But look at the trend.
And it could be innocuous. Like my wife and I, we homestead. We're in town, right? And we're allowed to keep small farm type animals like chickens and ducks and so on.
Right. It's very popular nowadays.
Yeah. And you know what? In the long run, that's helped us a lot with being able to cope with rising food prices and things that we see in inflation that's been discussed on this channel. The thing is, though, what if now that this right to clean air and so on has passed, what if somebody from the government decides to run down Main Street, and they see that we have this barn and we have the flock and everything, and they come in and they're like, okay, under the New York State Constitution, under Proposition 2, we find that you are in violation of not having a big enough run for your flock. You have 6 birds. The percentage of land that you're supposed to dedicate to their
Water.
housing, their water, must meet certain standards. They don't. Your property is now forfeit, and you've committed a crime.
Quite possible.
What?
It's quite possible.
Right, and under this proposition, that is exactly the kind of micromanaging that you're going to get from your local government or from the state government.
But are we surprised?
And no, I'm not surprised. But I'm not surprised that people voted for this because it sounds good. Like you said, it makes them feel good. Yes, we want to feel good and have that put in the Constitution of the state. What I'm surprised at is the fact that people don't think far enough about the consequence, and on that, I think, is where the decades worth of training from society, from propaganda, from the government, from culture, moving away from this idea of individual responsibility, accountability, and consequences, and not discussing them even, but just enjoy yourself. The sort of I don't know if you'd call it a hedonistic mentality or not.
Kind of, yes.
But it's a sort of life free of consequence. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it for you. The only thing that we ask is that you comply.
And that's, it's a wonderful message. It sounds great. It's one of the reasons why socialism is so popular, especially with young kids in college who don't have any life experiences, who don't know anything different, and have been taught throughout all of their education, well, this is the way. Government will take care of it. Government's going to take care of Social Security. Government's going to take care of protecting you. You don't need to defend yourself. You don't have to. Right. The rich people will be punished. We're going to take away their money. there's so many ways that they've said this, and it's always the same thing. Cradle to grave government under the control of a small group of elites who act like neo-nobles because they're smarter than you are about your own life. And that's whether it's Obamacare or the red flag laws or what we're seeing with this bill, Proposition 2, which is clean air, clean water. They're all the same thing. It's government is smarter than you, and they will do it. And the one thing I always like to mention to people, it's always funny when I ask them this, who are in support of these ideas. Who runs government? Say something like, well, Democrats or Republicans. I'm like, no. That's wrong. That's what party runs government. I don't care about that. Throw that out the window. Who runs government? I'm not sure what you mean. What's Dr. Fauci? Oh, well, he's a doctor. No, throw that out the window. I'm not talking about his office. What is he? He's a person. People. Lois Lerner is a person. When we look at the VA, they're people. When we look at every part of government, they're people. These are, which means, and what's one thing we can say about every person on the face of the earth? They are fallible. They don't know everything. They make mistakes, some of them bigger than others. So why are you telling me that government, which is made up of millions of people who are all fallible, who are in a system that is inefficient and inept at times, like it is now, why is that smarter than me about my decisions for my life? The answer is, well, Mike, you could have heard the argument, well, you don't know everything. No, of course I don't. You're going to make mistakes. Yes, I will. Why is government any different? And in fact, because it's an inept system that is ill-defined and corrupt, why isn't that even more incorrect for making decisions than me for my life?
Right, and it's that reliance on experts. And my grandfather was often loved to say this. He said, Nick, do you ever know what the difference between an expert and somebody who's not an expert is? And I said, what? And he said, time. He would basically, you can become an expert just by dedicating more than just the normal amount of attention to a subject.
Well, we've been misled about what an expert is, because we're
and we've been trained to think that experts are infallible.
Yeah.
That somehow, when you become an expert, you achieve this sense of infallibility, and so you are not to be questioned.
Yeah, it's like
that's what happened with Dr. Fauci.
Well, all of our politicians.
For an example.
Well, them and all.
I mean, to see a prime example. Look at Dr. Fauci.
Yeah.
During the 80s, during the AIDS epidemic,
completely
he had problems
wrong.
there.
Completely wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
During COVID, he was all over the place.
And continues to be.
And what? And what makes an expert? That time is really the only thing that makes an expert, and even then, you're not infallible.
Exactly, and I hear that a lot. I hear people say all the time, well, Mike, you couldn't possibly know all these laws. I don't know all of them. I know a lot of them because I spend a lot of time on it. And you could too. Well, the politicians know, you know more than politicians. I'm like, well, some of them, yeah. I've known these people. I knew them before they got into elected office. I know them after they got into elected office. I actually speak with them. Yeah, they're just as stupid as anyone else. Do you think, as an example, I'll use Broome County Executive Jason Garnar, who I know personally, who's not a bad person. And he's as flawed as anyone else. And he's no genius about immune deficiencies. He doesn't know anything about that, but yet people, well, he must know what we have to do because he's, county executive. No, he doesn't. He doesn't know anything about that. He doesn't have a degree in that. He's no smarter than anyone else.
No, but he can wield the authority in the place of people that advise him that are labeled as experts.
Yeah, and when someone says,
and that,
go ahead.
And that speaks back to the idea of trusting your advisors to know what they're talking about, but the only way you can really hash out the truth when it comes to things like that is to make sure that you're hearing both sides of the discussion. And when you can't hear both sides of the discussion because one of the sides is being suppressed, then you don't have the truth. Then you don't have all the information. And then you have people in authority making decisions, which is where the failure lies.
Almost always.
And yeah, almost always. And that's why it's important for people to remain active. And I think that's the solution, is that people need to be active locally as much as in the general elections in the state or on the federal level. We need to return to the common discourse that would inform everybody properly, and have that discourse where we get both sides of the story so that we see what works, and that is the truth, and then base our decisions on the truth.
I think,
but you're not going to see that.
No, because that doesn't lead to power. Because
right.
if there is doubt, if there is a question, there is doubt. If there is doubt, then there is not. You will never get 100% compliance. There's always going to be some degree of resistance. That's why our military doesn't work. At least it used to not work under the idea that you could question your superiors unless there's something clearly illegal. You got an order. If it was a lawful order, you did it. So when they said, go charge that machine gun nest, you charged that machine gun nest. Now, if they said kill the civilians, you're saying no. It's not that hard.
You weren't asking, well, what's the benefit of me charging that machine gun nest? I think if I'm going to lose my life, I don't think I'm going to do that. Yeah, you can't. You can't have that kind of discussion when it comes to something like that. But if it's an unlawful order, like say,
go kill
you are going to guard this polling place and turn people away because of they're not wearing masks,
you should question that.
That's an unlawful order.
That's an unlawful order. You question that and you say, no, I won't do that. But we've been trained not to do that. And that's why we need more of this kind of discussion on the internet. We need more channels like this. And I don't care if you're talking about Gothics or you're looking at Tim Pool or Ben Shapiro or Louder Crowder, or if you're watching Walsh, who's a big guy on the left, or Russell Brand, who's somewhere in the middle. Fantastic. Listen to these people, have these conversations. We need more of that, not less, which is what we're getting.
Right.
And we're being told more and more, you're speaking out, you're going to be punished. How many times has this channel had issues where I can't get the message out? I've been shut down. Because they're going, you're not an expert. You don't know that. Well, back on February 17th, I told you that there was going to be a crash of the economy. Inflation is coming. It took the rest of the markets to, not because I'm smarter than everyone, but I looked at the data, I looked at what's going on, and I made a conclusion. Here we are 8 months later, and everyone else is going, hey, by the way, did you know that inflation's going up? No kidding. I knew that already. You can... Because we're smart as individuals. We don't need to have someone go, well, I have this office, so I know. No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't. I keep saying troubling lately. It's been a term I keep using, and it's only because I don't have, and I have a pretty good vocabulary, and it's the right word of where we're going. Because, and the biggest thing I think is, if we are looking at actual conclusions, the biggest conclusion we get from the evidence is, this isn't about you, Dal. It's not about me. I'm 53. I'm a black man. So they expect me to be dead somewhere in the next 10 to 15 years. You're a bit younger than me. They're expecting you to live probably another 30, 40 years. That's about it. Your kids, though... They have 50 years to screw over their lives and to take all of their power. They don't care about you and me. We're not going to be around long enough. The kids, though, They get them now. They've got 50, 60 good years of getting them to do anything they want. This is about compliance, but it's not about compliance about you or me. It's about compliance from the next generation, the next 2 generations. It's about power from them.
And I think that's the other half of the equation why you don't see a lot of pushback until it becomes so untenable that people have to say something, like in Loudoun County in Virginia.
Yeah.
When you had these decades with people of progressive ideology taking over positions of authority and then wielding that authority like a cudgel. And so a lot of people who are law-abiding that just want to be left alone, just to live their lives and decide for themselves what they're going to do with it. They don't want to be in conflict with the law because they're law-abiding. And then what ends up happening is you have this, like I was telling Michael Bowie earlier, you have this conflict of conscience. You know, you don't want that to be in conflict with the law because you've been brought up to be law-abiding, but at the same time, you get in your gut this feeling that you know the law is unjust, but you have no recourse to fight it lawfully because the law itself has been hijacked. The only thing you can do is try to maneuver within the system as best as you can to try to redress your grievances. One of the most basic ways and fundamental ways that you can do that is through the vote.
Mm-hmm.
But if the system of voting has been fortified, I guess is the word that YouTube allows now.
Yes.
Then you have an issue because the very fundamental way of redressing your grievances is now taken away from you, and the more you relinquish your freedoms and rights, the more that you have the tools that you can use to peaceably redress your grievances. You come to this conflict in your life as a law-abiding citizen. Where is the line that you're going to draw where what's lawful becomes unjust, and how are you going to deal with that? I can't answer that question. You can't answer that question.
No.
It's a personal question for everyone.
But the problem is we're all being forced more and more to answer that question
to come to that conclusion
individually. And
correct.
I think that many of the, and you can go left or right on this, the powers that be, the elites that are running our government are seeing the fact that, oh, we've gone so far, we're pushing these people, the masses, and they're starting to push back. And because we have such little interaction with these elites, and they are so unresponsive to our conversations from the public to the elected officials, they're starting to get nervous, and that's why we're getting more and more very vague laws. Look at laws that were written in the 1950s. Look at laws that are written today. Hell, just look at laws that were written 15 years ago versus laws that are written today. The laws are very different. They're not exacting anymore. And I think that's because we're not paying attention anymore. We're not holding them accountable. You know, there should be an outrage right now in America. We have at least 450 Americans in Afghanistan that have been abandoned. There should be an outrage that no one's talking about them. That should be the number one story on the news every night in America. It's not. We should see what happened to Jeremiah, as he described, should be an outrage. The local news and the state should be all over this, saying this is a problem.
That's correct.
And that we should be investigating this. Why did this happen? There should be someone saying, hey, Mike, you've got this photographic evidence of something that really should never be on an election poll, a polling location, that there should be an investigation. Someone should be following this. They're not doing it. We have Afghan refugees that are coming into New York State at some unknown date with an unknown group of people who have not been vetted, and evidence is coming up in 4 states that everywhere they appear, when we integrate them, there is always that integration is always followed by sexual assaults against women and minors every single time in 4 states at this point. Shouldn't we be prepared for that? But there's the news media. We've become compliant for the news media to say, well, if they're not talking about it, it must not be news because no one else knows enough to know that. I'm sorry. I know the people in the news. I speak with them often. I interact with them all the time. They're no smarter than anyone else. That's not the answer. We have to be involved. We have to make ourselves smarter, and we have to hold all of them accountable, including myself. I don't put myself above that. I don't get every detail exactly right. Sometimes my conclusions are wrong. That's okay. I'm a human being. Call me out. Say, Mike, you missed it. Okay.
Yeah.
But we don't learn and no one grows, and we don't preserve our freedoms if we don't have that conversation and take the risk to be wrong and are willing to question the authorities.
And that too is a thing, like risk aversion. You see a lot in the population. There's this aversion to risk, consequences, blowback, conflict, because you're going to be met with lawfare or violence, and that's what they want.
Well, I can tell you,
they being the progressive left, that's what they like to see, because as long as you care about risk aversion, you're not going to stand up.
lawful people are almost always risk adverse. The difference is they've equated, I believe, the idea of aversion or conflict. And it's conflict. There's nothing wrong with conflict. We've got this negative emotion around an idea around conflict. A conversation is a conflict. We have different ideas. Right. We're expressing them to each other, sometimes very passionately. Doesn't mean that we're aggressive or there's going to be an outbreak of violence. It just means there's a conflict. We don't agree. That's okay. But they have put into our heads that if there's a conflict, that's wrong. You're wrong because you can't have a conflict with government. And I disagree with that intensely because government doesn't improve if there is no conflict. Government doesn't stop being corrupt if there's no conflict. If we don't approach them and say, you hold them accountable and say, we need to have more accountability. We have to fix these problems. We actually have to come up with a solution, not a kick it down the road. Think of the eviction crisis. I started talking about that in January. I believe it was January 20th. We were talking about the eviction crisis. 12 million people who are going to be evicted out of their homes. We said, don't kick this down the road. We need an answer. Well, guess what? We kicked it down the road. Now the answer is, 12 million people are going to be evicted out of their homes. That's not an answer.
Right.
That you just pushed the problem down and hope everyone forgot. We can't do this. We do need to have some conflict. Conflict is not bad. There is no such thing as a microaggression, and we need to understand that. It is perfectly fine to be aggressive and passionate in what you believe, as long as that is not followed by actual violence or incitement of violence.
Correct.
And that's why I always say on the show, you've been a long time fan of the show. You've seen, I've said to people all the time, you can call in. And almost every single time we have someone from the left who does call in, their only action is to try and incite violence. They're trying to attack me personally. They insult people. They scream. They try to be disruptive. They don't actually have a conversation. That almost never happens.
No, and I think that's because, this is something that actually Hannity pointed out on his show. I happened to be driving, and Hannity pointed out that whenever it comes to policy, whenever it comes to actual discourse, they don't have it. the progressive ideology does not allow for these things, and so the only thing that they can do is try to shout you down or intimidate you, because they have nothing else. There's no retort for progressivism because it's not practical, which is when you said the New York mayor was running on practical progressivism, I just started laughing.
I thought it was insane.
There is no such thing.
Yeah, I thought it was insane. I just couldn't believe him. Like, you're actually saying, and I guarantee you, 2020, that's going to be a term. That's going to be a term. You're going to hear more of it. You know, it's going to be practical progressive. I'm a practical progressive. You're going to hear that a lot. It's insane.
And if you get them to try and define it, though, they'll just manipulate the definitions, like we were talking about earlier. And really, that's the thing is, I guess the best thing to say is to just nail them down to definitions, hold them to it, and then when they screw up, find a way to hold them accountable. That's really the only thing that we can do.
And that's what we should be doing, and that's why I hope I'm encouraging. And maybe, and I do, again, let me advise people, yes, I want you to like, share, and all that, but take this episode, and even if people want to, please clip the entire segment of me talking with Jeremiah and send that out to people and say, what kind of government do you want? Because this is the kind of government we have, and this is the problem. You know, well, the mandates are good for you. This is what the mandates lead to. This is what government that is unaccountable leads to. This is where the problems begin. And if you think if you thought that was bad, what happened to Jeremiah, multiply that by 10 years, because the 5-year-olds or the 8-year-olds, and they become 18-year-olds, and they're going to be voting. And the only thing they know is that what happened to Jeremiah is what's supposed to happen to Jeremiah.
Right.
That terrifies me.
Thank you very much for having me on your show, Mike.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, folks, that was one of our listeners, Dow, and we're very happy to have had him on, talking to us about some of his thoughts about the election, about the Proposition 2, and where is this train going to? Where is this government leading us? What is happening when we don't become accountable to our government? We've got to understand these things, and these are all interconnected. You know, whether we're talking about taxes, we're talking about Afghanistan, we're talking about voting, we're talking about the vaccine mandates. When we put these things together, they're all the same thing. They're interconnected. They are not separate issues. I often hear people say, politics, you know, I don't pay attention to politics. I don't need to worry about that. Yes, you do. It's going to affect your life. More people know about the Kardashians than they do about Bill 5854. Matter of fact, they wouldn't know where to look that up. And please, folks, you should be able to know how to look up HR 5854, read it, and see what it says. And thankfully, it's one of the few bills that are actually pretty short and it's pretty straightforward. You should be able to do that. The media should be giving you that information, linking to it, showing you it, and say, hey, you read it for yourself. Tell me what you think. Because that's us being involved. But when we don't do that, when we're not accountable to our government, when we aren't asking them these questions, you know what happens? We get what happens to Jeremiah. We get Americans left in Afghanistan discarded. And let me say it again. We have the most callous, uncaring government I have ever been alive to see. 53 years of my life, I have never seen a government so uncaring and callous and devoid of emotion. And in the worst kind of way. If they are willing to take hundreds, perhaps thousands of Americans and to leave them in the middle of a terrorist hotbed where we have 3 different terrorist factions that have no desire beyond killing every American they could possibly find. And if they're willing to do that and sleep well at night, what are they going to do to you? What are they going to do to you? If they're willing to change up the names and definitions, the definition of vaccine has been changed. They're willing to change the meanings of words. They're creating new terms like my truth. Doesn't mean it. By definition, my truth is an oxymoron and it is a statement of idiocy. Oh no, that's intellectual. My college professor taught me that. No, then your college professor's an idiot because that's not a term. It's an oxymoron. It defies definition unless you change the definitions. Government's here to protect you. They're going to help you. Well, yes, they were created to protect us. That's not what it's doing now. We have to hold them accountable. We have to look at these different things and say, why are you doing this and what's going on? Let me give you a great example of this, folks, because it's something that's happening right now. The infrastructure bill. You may recall, back on April 1st, it was not April Fool's Day, but on April 1st, we were talking about the infrastructure, and we had just heard about the new infrastructure deal. Basically, it was infrastructure. It was Obama's infrastructure 2.0. We're going to get shovel-ready jobs. We're going to make this economy so much better. It's only going to cost a couple $1 trillion. Don't worry, build back better. It'll all be great. Just take all the money we don't have, increase the debt, decrease the value of your dollar, deflate the value of money, inflate the cost of everything, and it's all going to be for your best interest. Because we're going to spend money on the grid. We're going to fix the electric grid, which, yes, we do need to fix the electric grid. I agree. And you've been told this for decades, so have I. We need to fix the American grid. And we can do that because of the Biden infrastructure deal, which is exactly what we did in the Obama infrastructure deal. Don't believe me? Look up the Obama infrastructure deal. You'll see it's the same thing. And it's only going to cost us $100 billion. In fact, $90 billion. That's the bill that was passed yesterday. $90 billion. They're spending $90 billion to fix the electric grid. The electric grid costs $4.5 trillion. If we are actually going to fix the grid, especially if we want to make it renewable, $4.5 trillion just for the electric grid. That's nothing else. That's not fixing or changing anything else. This is coming from the left. This is the left with their information, their data, and they're giving you the best case number. The true value, the true estimates actually put it closer to $6 to $7 trillion. But in the pipe dream world of the far left, the infrastructure, just the electric grid, is $4.5 trillion. Let's go with their number. Let's call it $4 trillion, which is an insane, stupid amount of money. And we just passed a $1 trillion infrastructure deal. $1 trillion. 13 Democrats said, this is perfect. This is a great idea, which is insane. And that's Representatives Fitzpatrick, Garbarino, Katko, Young, Gonzalez, Kinzinger, Malatokas, McKinley, Upton, Reed, Smith, and Van Drew. These are all Republicans. You know who said it's not a good idea? That it's a terrible bill? The Squad. The progressives. That's Presley, AOC, Bowman, Bush, Omar, Tlaib. They all said, nope, this is horrible. It doesn't go far enough. It's not progressive enough. But here's the thing. I want to show you the bill is actually the $1.2 trillion bill that was just passed. Spends $110 billion on roads and bridges. $65 billion for the electric grid. $65 billion. Not even the 100. If you go back and you look at it in April, they were going to spend $100 billion on the electric grid. It's now gone down to $65 billion. That's not even enough to keep up with the cost of fixing the problems that exist right now. That isn't even enough money to maintain the electric grid we have right now. But this is going to fix the economy. This is going to fix the nation. Do you know how much it costs to spend to fix the roads and bridges? By the way, what's in this bill? Where are they spending the money? $400 billion on child care, universal preschool. What does that have to do with roads and bridges? Infrastructure is roads and bridges and buildings and electricity. That's infrastructure. By definition, that's infrastructure. What does universal preschool have to do with roads, bridges, electricity, water pipes? What does that have to do with any of that? We're spending $400 billion on that. $400 billion on preschool, $65 billion on the power grid that everyone agrees is falling apart. $110 billion for roads and bridges that everyone agrees is falling apart. $400 billion for preschool. $200 billion for a child tax credit. What does a child tax credit have to do with roads, bridges, electricity, water pipes? We're spending $150 billion for home care. Again, roads, bridges, electricity, water pipes. Where's the connection? How about this? We have $150 billion for housing, for equity. Equity. What does that have to do with anything? Okay, you're going to say, Mike, you know what? Mike, you got to calm down. You got to calm down. We're spending $130 billion on Obamacare. What does that have to do with electricity, water pipes, roads, bridges? Where is the connection? I'm sorry. We're spending $550 billion to get clean energy. I don't know how that's supposed to, I don't know what that means. No one's going to tell you what that is. That's to clean the air. It doesn't mean that you get a better road, a better bridge, or better electricity. Here's the one that always gets me. It's $100 billion for immigration. We're spending $100 billion on immigration. We're spending $65 billion, $65 billion for the power grid. We're spending $110 billion for roads and bridges. We are spending as much money on immigration. That's to get more people into the nation that are illegal, to give them a path to citizenship, as we are spending on roads and bridges that are literally falling apart at this moment, and everyone agrees on it. And everyone agrees that they are, in fact, falling apart. How is this government not inept? How is this not the most inefficient way to run a government? How can we have trust in a government where we have individuals in that government that are lying to us, that are abusing their positions of power, that are going out and literally violating the very same laws that they expect you to follow, they don't want to follow themselves? That we have individuals in our government who are going around and they are literally taking actions behind our backs that are violating our laws and regulations. They are insulting us. They are insulting us and daring us to ask questions that they won't even answer. How can we trust these things? How can we allow this to happen? We have to speak, because this isn't about you and me. They're not worried about that. They're worried about the kids coming up next. Climate change is the most important thing. No, I don't think so. I think having an electric grid that works is more important. I think having the ability to get water and pipes is more important. I think having the ability to control our government and to make it efficient and not corrupt is massively more important. Tina mentions, I think you meant 13 Republicans, not Democrats. Did I call them Democrats? I apologize. Nope, those were 13 Republicans, and I stand corrected. And let me go over their names again. Thank you for correcting me, Tina. It's Fitzpatrick, Gabarino, Katko, Young, Gonzalez, Kinzinger, Malatokis, McKinley, Upton, Reed, Smith, and Van Drew. And by the way, for those who are in the southern tier of New York, that's Congressman Reed of the 23rd District, Congressman Katko of the New York 24th District. They're right around us. Those are Republicans who are backing this bill that's going to spend more money on immigration than it is on roads and bridges. It's going to spend more money on preschool than it is on roads, bridges, or the electric grid combined. What's that got to do with infrastructure? No idea. You know what it does have to do with? Equity. It has to do with progressivism. It has to do with social engineering. It has nothing to do with actual engineering. Why are we letting these politicians do this? Why are we not holding them accountable? I don't care if they're Republicans or not. I think this is something we need to hold them accountable for. And this is why, sometimes the Republican Party's pissed off at me, because I'm going to hold them accountable. This was a stupid thing. This is horrible. And we still have Build Back Better with $3.5 trillion that's coming down the road so the IRS can go into your bank account so that they can pay for this. So the only way that they can pay for this is they got to tax you more. And using Proposition 2, clean air, clean water, going to tax you more. Here comes that carbon tax. Oh, they didn't tell you about that? Maybe they don't want you to know, because you're going to complain until it's too late. And then they expect you to comply. Without question, without argument, because that's a microaggression, and those are illegal, apparently. Jeremiah mentions, don't calm down. I don't want to get into the Federal Reserve discussion, but they're making the windfall from lending money to our government. The government just keeps spending on things full of special interests and devoid of transparency and honesty. And I do think that the Federal Reserve is not transparent. I agree with you. And I think that there should be an accounting of the Federal Reserve. And I think it's insane that we are at $29 trillion, about to hit 31, maybe $32 trillion in spending in the space of a year. That we have spent more money than, we've printed more money than most of the presidents in our history. I think you can get up to, I think it's the first 40 presidents of the United States combined didn't spend as much money as we have spent in 1 year, not even a full year, in the first 9 months of the Biden-Harris administration. If I'm doing my math correctly, 40 presidents combined spent less money than Joe Biden in 9 months. Even the Obama administration, which spent money like a sieve, doubled our national debt in 8 years. Doubled it by himself. Just one man, President Obama, and destroyed our economy. And Biden has almost matched him dollar for dollar for what Obama did in 8 years. Joe Biden has almost completed. He's got 75% of the way in less than 1 year. But we don't hold them accountable. Why not? Because the news media isn't willing to put in an article and actually say Joe Biden's screwing up? Because the news media doesn't want you to know that Joe Biden has lied to your face repeatedly, and it is documented that our politicians are failing the public, and that we have a system that is questionable at best. I don't know, folks. Yeah, I think but Jeremiah, I agree. The Fed has a problem. And it's perfectly fine to point it out. Now, how big of a problem? That's a different question. And are they doing a lot of things wrong? Absolutely. And are we going to be punished for it? We are being punished for it. How much is inflation up? How small is the package of food that you go to the store to get? I was in the store, 2 weeks ago? I bought literally one of the plastic bags, one of the bags full of food. One bag cost me over $100. I remember when I was a kid, back in the 80s, literally the early 80s, and if I remember correctly, we got 2 entire shopping carts full of food for about $150. I spent about the same to put food into one bag, and I don't eat expensive. We're not talking about anything crazy. You know it's true. You've been to the store. I guarantee you, Pelosi hasn't. Schumer hasn't. Kirsten Gillibrand isn't. They're not going to the store. They're not going to Walmart like you are. They are not. They do not, and they will not. They have fences and walls around their homes so that you can't get near them. They live an entirely different life than you do and have been doing so for decades. They live like nobles. And you are the serfs. You are the peasants to them. And you may not like that. And if you're a Democrat or a progressive, you may not like the fact that there is no connection between your life and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and that they have a very different outlook on how you should live your life, not their lives, your life. You may not like that, but that doesn't change the fact that it exists, that this is the truth, that these are the conclusions we can make from the evidence we see before us, and we're not holding them accountable. Thus, the Fed keeps printing money, spending our money, loaning it out, loaning it back to us. And we become poorer and poorer day by day because your money is worth less and less. We are becoming a banana republic in every sense of the words. Our money is becoming Play-Doh. And it's just silly. It's silly money. It's monopoly money. Our government is corrupt at every level of government. And I don't care who's in charge, whether it's Republicans or Democrats or conservatives or libertarians. We have or especially progressives, we have a government that's corrupt. The system is corrupt. It's not racist, it's corrupt. There is a difference. It's a very big difference. And people are using that corruption, that ineptness to manipulate for their political gain against you. You are a pawn being used, and that is sad, and I disagree with it. And we can change this. We have the power. We have the power to change this. Government is, the true power of the government is in the people, in us taking action and making sure we step out there and we send letters to our Congress members, to elected officials, to the various departments, holding them accountable, writing in. We write the letters, we make the phone calls, we demand from the newspapers that they follow up on these issues. We hold the power. And when they don't do things, we don't vote them back in. We don't reelect them. We elect someone else. We go out there and we get petitions like Edward Durr, a truck driver who spent $153 and is elected in New Jersey in the New Jersey Senate. Because you can. The power is with you. You are not required to stick along party lines or to the people who are already established that have been there for decades. They're screwing up. Get rid of them. If John Katko and Tom Reed, they pissed you off because they passed a $1.2 trillion bill that doesn't focus on infrastructure, that it's built on social engineering. If they piss you off, don't vote for them. I don't care that I'm a Republican. Don't vote for them. I don't care that I believe in conservative views. Don't vote for them. Throw them out, get someone else who's better. Someone who will say, hey, if we're going to spend $1 trillion, spend it on infrastructure. Not on immigration, not on preschool, not on some other progressive pipe dream of some practicality. Screw that. Don't spend the money there. Spend it on infrastructure. Actually fix the electric grid. Actually fix our roads and bridges. Not a stopgap that'll get us to the next election, but actually fix it. I hope Durham is closing in on them. He needs to. We need to get rid of a lot of these politicians. We need to replace them. I have no problem with saying we need congressional term limits. If you've been there for more than 6 years, you don't need to be there anymore. I don't care what party you belong in. If you've been in Congress for more than 6 years, you need to go. You're done. You've had 6 years. Go back to work. Let someone else get in there. I don't care what party they're in. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just this crazy black man, 53 years of age, who's lived across the world. Maybe I just don't get it. And if I don't, I'm pretty happy about that. Because if getting it means blind compliance without question, even when things are obviously corrupt and inept and not deserving of the trust that we give anyone else, you know, I don't know what to say. I mean, we've caught Biden repeatedly lying to our faces. Most recently, with 450 Americans who he callously has abandoned in Afghanistan and will not think about them. He will not mention them. Even when they are brought up, we have elected officials like Congressman Antonio Delgado will not speak about these people, even when directly asked, what is going on? How are we trying to get these people back home? He will not respond. That's corrupt. Why should I trust these people when they say, well, I'm trying to help you? Like you're helping those people? The people you've forgotten? The people you've abandoned and thrown away because it's not politically expedient for you? Those people? And you trust, I'm supposed to trust you with that? Imagine if someone came to your house, someone you know, they stole your car. They come back to your house after stealing your car and they ask you for $20. Would you give that person $20? Because that's what the Biden administration is asking us right now. That's what our government is asking us to do right now. Yes, they've screwed over America. We fired 11,000 people with the XL pipeline. It increased the cost of gasoline. It reduced the energy that can be produced in the United States, not only cheaply and cleanly, but just to be able to be done. We hurt our economy. They turn around and say, oh, by the way, we have the solution for clean energy. Why should I trust you? Why would I believe you? You've already hurt our nation. You've already hurt our people. You've already set our country back. Why should I believe that you have an answer for anything? I mean, does that make sense, folks? Am I just not making sense here? Am I not explaining it properly? Because if I'm not, just tell me. You can call in, you can leave a comment and say, Mike, you just got it all wrong. You're not understanding it. And do you see how these things are connected? Because it's the same corruption, it's the same ineptitude, it is the same inefficiency, it is the same lack of accountability that is running through as a common thread at every point in our government. Whether it's increasing taxes, whether it's deflating our economy and the value of the dollar, whether it's talking about the errors and problems with certain elections, whether it's talking about the Americans that have been abandoned, the Afghans that are coming in and being introduced into our communities, the children that have been abused and are now being shipped around like a grocery bag full of eggs. These things are all connected by a thread and a theme of corruption, ineptitude, inefficiency. And we have a news media that's saying, don't look at it, don't talk about it. And a social media that's saying, and if you do, we're going to punish you. folks, we can stop this. We can turn this around. The first thing to do, though, is we have to acknowledge it, and then we have to act. I don't know. But maybe it's me. And I've been speaking for about 3 hours and 15 minutes, yeah? And I do appreciate and thank you. By the way, if you've made it this far into the program for 3 hours and 15 minutes and joined us here, please do like, do share, do let people know, especially the portion with Jeremiah today. Let people know about this and subscribe, because it makes a difference. We want to hit 1,000 people. It helps because we'll change the algorithm. We'll reach more people around the world. They'll be able to speak and to know you're not alone. You're not. I know there are thousands of people, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who agree with us. We see polls on them all the time. You're not alone. And hopefully we'll be able to reach more of them. More of them. If you can help us by just subscribing and just showing up and watching the show like you have been, and we appreciate it deeply. I want to, again, especially thank Jeremiah and Dal for calling in today, giving us their thoughts and sharing their opinions. We appreciate everyone who wrote a message, like Mike Bowie, Jeremiah, Tina, Hot Chicks, the new people, James, who had made his comment as well, and everyone who watches this, Mavis and all the others who see the show sometimes afterwards. We want to thank you all. You guys make it all worthwhile. James Lucid, who's watching as well. We appreciate each and every one of you. We look forward to seeing you. And during the week, we do about three or four episodes a week normally. Hey, Giants won. The Giants won again. You know, it's got to be a blue moon out there. I'm glad. It's a good thing. Speaking of which, I'm off to go over to the Belmar. I'm going to have a beer and watch a football game. And I want to wish you all the same kind of great time. I want you to enjoy the rest of the weekend. Have a good week. We'll see you during the episodes during the week. And again, next Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time from anywhere in the world. Please join us in our live stream. I thank you, and I wish you all the best.